What's going on, everybody? This is John J Gaming on the mic here, coming at you with a brand new episode of the NCSL series here on NCAA 14, and also featuring that college football revamp as well. We have a special treat for you guys here today, as here in season number 5, we are doing things a little bit differently as mentioned in the previous episode. Make sure you check that previous episode out for context, but we are going to go through the entirety of year number 5 in one single episode. I'm going to take you around all of the key games throughout college football, throughout season number 5, where we see more than 120 plus college football teams vying for that ultimate prize that is a national championship. So with that being said, hope you guys are locked in. Should be a good one here, and I hope you guys are excited for how we're doing season number 5, and let me know how you guys what you guys think of this new format, something that I might look to for future series. So any feedback that you have on this new format, definitely let me know down in the comments. But if you like what you see, make sure you go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. But now let's go check out some of these previews before we get into the game action real quick. So starting off this season, this is what the preseason top 25 actually ends up shaking out to be. Now, USC went to the national championship last year, but with that said, they didn't win it because they lose to the team that ends up being number 2 in our preseason poll, the Ole Miss Rebels. And Ole Miss will be highly regarded, has a very good football team on its hands, and so with that said, should be interesting to see if Ole Miss can defend their national championship. Some other teams to certainly watch out for here is maybe some teams like Miami, Texas, and Michigan, all having serious national championship aspirations. Nebraska's can certainly be the same. They're ranked at number 8 in the country. Ohio State seems like they have one heck of a squad. They're a 99 overall team, at least offensively. They're coming in at number 10 in the nation. LSU seems to have a good team. If they can utilize their talent, they could make a deep run here in year number 5 as well. Navy, who comes into the college football playoff last year unranked, well, they make that deep run. They make it to the semifinals before they lose to USC. They get a lot more love here, ranked number 14 in the entire country. And then this is what the rest of the top 25 is going to look like going into year number 5, as well as some other notable teams here that just barely missed out on being ranked at the start of this upcoming season that we have in store here. And then we get into what the conference outlooks are going to look like for each individual conference as we get started with gameplay. So the ACC doesn't have a top flight program, but there is 3 to 5 programs out there that do have a legitimate shot of winning the ACC. The American looks like Nebraska looks like to be the big favorite here, with Minnesota possibly having something to say. That Minnesota and Nebraska game some point in the regular season could have a big impact on how that shakes out. Big 12, Texas seems to be the team to beat, as no one is really at the same level as Texas is right now. So if Texas does not end up winning the Big 12, I would be shocked. The Big 10 is kind of in a similar fashion, except it's with 2 teams. Michigan, who went to the conference championship last year, and then Ohio State, who actually won the Big 10. It's really these 2 programs, and then there is this massive gap going on right now between the rest of the Big 10 right now. A lot of catch-up that needs to be done in that regard. For that northeastern part of the country, should be a little bit more interesting. Navy is the favorite here, but there's some other good programs here like Penn State. Army is in here. Pittsburgh, maybe Boston College might have something to say about it. Should be a more competitive race in the Conference USA, a more balanced conference overall. In the MAC, Northern Illinois looks to repeat as the MAC champions. They are doing this without their offensive coordinator, who moved on to be the head coach of Ohio. They are the team to beat here in the MAC, as no other team in this conference is actually on the same level at the moment, which is really interesting to see. Love that for Northern Illinois, though. As for the Mountain West seems to have the most parity, at least that we have noticed so far in this series. Should be a much more balanced conference overall, as we got several contenders that have a realistic shot of winning the Mountain West. I mean, I'm down here at number 8, and Wyoming is certainly, it's a long shot, but it's not a complete far cry. You really have to wait till like number 10 in order to get to teams that really don't have a shot to win the Mountain West. Should be an intriguing conference to follow. For the Pac-12 has been seen as one of the most competitive conference in the country, at least the best conference in the entire country. Should be a 2-team race, though. It should come down to USC or Washington for the Pac-12 championship once again. As for the SEC, the same could be said, except it's probably a 3-team race here. Georgia doesn't have the same offense that it has from last year, but their defense is still elite. Miami certainly seems like the more well-rounded team. And then who's to say Florida State can't do something? Florida State seems like a dark horse to win the SEC. Couple of other teams here that are either ranked or are receiving votes, but is realistically a 3-team race. And finally, we got the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt got 14 teams, and it's been a pretty entertaining conference to follow overall. Ole Miss and Arkansas, as well as LSU, makes up that top tier. Alabama at the moment is a step below, but they can certainly make a run. And Troy is resurging, but they are probably a year away from realistically competing for a Sun Belt championship. So we'll get things going here with week number 1 in this case, and while in week number 1 we didn't have any marquee top 25 matchup, we still had some spicy things happen in week number 1, or at least some close calls. How about one of the first games that feature a top 25 team, nationally televised by the way, in LSU, going on the road to take on Southern Miss in Sun Belt Conference action, and Southern Miss stuns LSU. The number 12 team in the nation falls, and that could have huge ramifications for the Sun Belt moving forward. As for Nebraska, they didn't fare too much better though, as Oklahoma also gave them a run for their money. Nebraska was able to pull it out, but man, this ended up being a close call as well. In other news, the champions from year number 3 in UCLA opened up their season against Eastern Carolina, and in the second half, UCLA pulled away. They ended up winning pretty comfortably, even though it seems like for about a half or so, things were a little dicey here. As for Minnesota, the same thing could be said, as Syracuse did give a pretty spirited game, but Minnesota will start the season 1-0. The runners-up from last year in USC started against an FCS opponent, and USC blew them out of the water. Florida State is able to start 1-0 by beating Stanford 44-13. And your defending national champions in the Ole Miss Rebels, they take down Illinois in the Cowboys All-State Kickoff Classic. They win 37-28 in what was overall a very entertaining game to watch. So overall, in that first week of the season, even though there was that fair share of close calls that we ended up witnessing, we don't see at least a big change here in the top 25 as of right yet. I mean, still a lot to be decided, of course. We did have some minor movements for some of these other schools, like Clemson moved up a few spots. Wisconsin is actually jumping into the top 25, and that spot opens up because Northern Illinois did drop their game against Maryland. So Northern Illinois no longer ranked in the top 25. Wisconsin is in at 21 as they pull the upset off against Hawaii. LSU and Hawaii are both now teams that are just kind of hanging on a thread now because of those losses. So we get started with week number 2 then, and we see the top 25 teams at least overall play a little bit better. Texas is able to beat UNLV 56-20 as Texas starts year number 5 on a pretty high note. But then Rutgers, who has a new head coach after their previous head coach retires, well, they make a statement here in week number 2. They go into Seattle, Washington, and pull off a pretty monumental upset. Rutgers wins this one 23-21, and now you gotta put some respect on Rutgers' name now. In other news, Stanford does end up dropping their second straight game as they got blown out by Penn State 42-10, proving that Penn State is a top 15 squad. Florida is also able to win their game against fellow Florida squad USF 27-17. USF coming off of a win in the previous week, but can't make it 2 in a row. And then we have an exciting shootout happening in Los Angeles as UCLA was in a fight for its life against Boston College, but UCLA was able to pull it out with a good fourth quarter run towards the end, as I believe they were able to rattle off 21 unanswered before Boston College scored again, and UCLA is able to get to 2-0 because of that. But we do get ourselves into our very first top 25 matchup of the season. Should be an early classic with the Seminoles of Florida State making the road trip up to Annapolis, Maryland to take on this number 13 ranked Navy squad. A Navy squad, by the way, that is just coming off of a Cinderella run in the college football playoff, making it to the semifinals as an unranked team outside the top 25. And Navy, just from the get-go, first drive of the season for the Midshipmen, they turn that into a quick touchdown. And Spencer Grant and company, they are just leaving right where they left off, it seems like, as the Midshipmen are on the verge of putting up 20 plus in just one quarter of action. They're going to go to this quarterback draw, and it works to perfection. Spencer Grant found in the end zone, and it's another touchdown for the Midshipmen. Florida State now, they're going to be in some deep trouble here, trying to avoid their first loss of the season. If Florida State wants to come back and win this game, they got to find a way to get some stops on defense. Because, oh baby, while their offense came to play, defensively, it has been a complete disaster. A disaster that is going to be tough to avoid as Spencer Grant's going to fire over the middle. Almost finds the end zone yet again, but it's going to be marked down at the 1 yard line. And everyone's going to go in their power formation, but they're not running it up the gut. It's a throw instead, and Spencer Grant is going to fire a dot into the end zone. Another touchdown for the Midshipmen as they do end up putting up 30 plus in a single half, and the points just keep coming. 3rd and 4 coming up. This is a critical stop that Florida State needs. Grant is going to roll to his right. He finds his guy. He was able to put more oomph on that ball. That could have been yet another touchdown. Instead, we are looking at a goal line situation. They do a little bit of wildcat down at the goal line, and my man is completely untouched. He finds the end zone as well, and they double up Florida State, and they continue to do that. That is a mossing if I have ever seen one. How about that for an exclamation point, as Spencer Grant is going to set himself a school record for most touchdown passes in a single game, and that's an iconic way to make that touchdown happen. Navy is going to win here extremely convincingly here in week 2. Rounding out some of the notable scores from week number 2, we do see that Wisconsin beats Oregon State 31-28. So in a big win for the American Conference as a whole, Wisconsin is able to go 2-0 against the Pac-12, also beating Hawaii back in week number 1. As for the Miami Hurricanes, they open up their season against the defending Mountain West Conference champions in Colorado, and the Hurricanes handle it well, winning 35-23. The Buffaloes, who went to the college football playoff and made it to the quarterfinal, starts the season 0-2. Now, for the guys that made it to the Big Ten championship game and won, Ohio State opened up their season today, but has some more cause for concern. They beat Chattanooga, which they were supposed to anyways, but they barely do it. They only win by a single field goal. Chattanooga actually had a chance to win this thing. And finally, LSU was able to avoid falling out of the top 25 for right now by being able to get their first win of the season, beating Mississippi State 31-17. So So because of the win that Navy was able to get in gameplay, we did end up seeing Navy get a few more spots up these polls, and they're now a 10th ranked team in the entire country. So you do love to see that for the Navy midshipmen. Florida State, on the other hand, they moved down a couple of spots. They're down to number 14, so that was a 7-stop drop for not only losing to Navy, but they did get blown out by Navy. Rutgers pulled that upset off against Washington, so they move all the way down to number 21, and this also creates room for Rutgers to enter the top 25. They're now the number 24th ranked team in the entire country. They do replace San Diego State, even though San Diego State was on bye last week, so tough break for the Aztecs. So now we go ahead and jump into a early regular season matchup in non-conference play. Minnesota, who comes in 2-0, makes the road trip up to Ann Arbor to take on this number 6 ranked Michigan squad, led by Junior Blaylock. And speaking of Junior Blaylock, got this Michigan team off to an extremely hot start. They quickly jump out to a 21-0 lead, and it quickly seemed like one of those games where Michigan was just going to go ahead and run away with this. I thought we were going to sim out quickly, but even though Minnesota was getting embarrassed off the field in that first quarter and a half, give the Golden Gophers here some credit. They continue to fight on. They get it cut down to a 2-possession game. And suddenly, things could get very interesting here if Michigan cannot convert in the red zone, as Blaylock's going to look over to right-hand side, finds his receiver, breaks a couple of tackles, still trying to keep going as Sean Johnson is eventually brought down. Minnesota does have to start using its timeouts. And will it be enough, though? It seems like at this point, Minnesota, they gotta force a turnover in order to have any sort of shot. Blaylock's gonna drop back to pass, so looks over the middle and finds Brett Dawson for the quick touchdown, as Michigan does put yet another one up on the scoreboard, putting up that 50-burger at home as they take a free touchdown win over a top 15 opponent in the American. We do also have a quick studio update as UCF is able to get to 2-0 after beating the Cal Bears. But in between that top 25 game that you just saw and what we're going to see here pretty soon within week number 3, how about Wyoming 3-0 and beating Florida State on the road? It has to be an alternate universe right now. Florida State's going to be on a 2-game losing streak and might fall out of the top 25. However, the other top 25 teams in these nationally televised notable games did handle business. Virginia Tech's able to beat Missouri 45-38. That allows Virginia Tech to stay in the top 25. Georgia was actually in a close one with USF, but the Georgia Bulldogs were able to pull it out in that fourth quarter of action. One of those 14 points came from a safety, though, so they tried to go for a 2-point conversion multiple times and failed. Thankfully, they didn't need them. LSU was able to blow out Tulane 42-10 as the Tigers now are on their first winning streak of the season. Purdue was also able to blow out Purdue 49-17, so Texas is off to a hot start. And then Eastern Michigan got a rare opportunity to be on national television and actually held their own against Ohio State, but did eventually fall 38-24. Texas State was surprisingly able to give USC a good game as Justin Faith was able to lead his offense to a pretty good first half, but just ran out of gas. The Trojans were still able to win. And Washington was able to rebound from their surprising loss against Rutgers. They blow out the Cincinnati Bearcats 59-28. A rough day for James Dodkin's staff. Meanwhile, we do have a critical conference matchup for the very first time here in year number 5, as number 17 Florida is going to make the quick trip down to Miami, taking on this number 4 ranked Miami Hurricane squad, as this is going to be the battle of the Seminole War Canoe. Imagine that, two teams that don't really like each other playing for a trophy that technically is named after Florida State Seminoles. Wild world that we live in, but hey, you know, it is what it is, as Trevor Veeden, one of your guys' customs, actually finds the end zone in order to get the scoring started here on this rainy night in Miami, as they're looking to continue to try to provide balance for this guy right here, Caleb Kirk, one of the best running backs in the country, won the Heisman Trophy as a freshman. There wasn't a lot of scoring that happened here, but a 20-10 victory no less for the Miami Hurricanes. But meanwhile, that being said, we do have some studio updates that do happen all around college football. Oregon, first and foremost, is going to go to Marshall, and the Oregon Ducks barely able to pull it out, winning 24-27. Chris Gentry, one of your guys' customs, did find the end zone. Then we have some other close scores around college football, but most notably, Arkansas is going to go down. Memphis able to pull off a big-time upset in Sun Belt Conference play, one that I'm sure will see the Arkansas Razorbacks fall completely out of his top 10 as well. Plus, not to mention the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors pick up their first win of the season after they take down Boston College on the road in this one. Now, there were a few other games that did happen that is going to create some changes in the top 25 going into week number 4, though. UCLA, they were 2-0, taking on an FCS team, but that's why they played the game, though. They lose convincingly to an FCS squad, and of course, that's going to cause UCLA to crash out. Also losing their first game of the season is Wisconsin. Wisconsin loses here 42-35. The Miami Redhawks, however, take advantage and they win their first game of the year. And then, of course, we had Rutgers, who was recently just in this top 25. Well, their state does not end up being very long because Oklahoma State beats them by a couple of touchdowns. The Cowboys are still undefeated, but still looking for some respect on their name. So now we check back to the top 25 as we're getting ready to close on that first month of the season. And in that first month of the season, one newcomer to the top 10, that's Iowa. They sneak into number 10, and we'll see them soon, having them play Minnesota. Penn State and Navy should be a pretty exciting game to watch as well. Minnesota does lose a few spots, though. They moved down 3 spots to number 14, even though it was a 3-possession loss. But other things that did end up happening here, Arkansas falls down 9 spots. Florida only moves down 1, even though they lose against Miami. So a lot of respect given to the Gators. And then we have a few newcomers. San Diego State is back in. Florida State still in that top 25, but just barely. And then West Virginia and Troy entering the top 25 as well. So we get into, I believe it's week number, is it week number 4? It is week number 4 already. Yeah, we're losing count already. Week number 4 starts with an early game between Washington State and USC. Washington State finding out the hard way under Remy Natalius, who's now a head coach here, that Pac-12 football is a different level right now. Taking on the number 1 team in the nation, USC pitches essentially a shutout until garbage time comes around. USC wins comfortably 28-7. And then Georgia continues its dominance in the regular season. They win their 3rd straight game in the SEC, taking down UCF 42-32. The Knights of UCF making their opener in the SEC this year. As for Ohio State, they had a slight chance to have a test against Iowa State, who started their season 2-0, but they passed the test with flying colors as they were able to pull away in the 4th quarter, winning by 20+ to remain undefeated. Meanwhile, LSU continues its strong start in the Sun Belt as LSU is able to beat Louisiana Tech pretty handily. 45-14 does end up being your final score in this one. And then Oklahoma State is handled their first loss of the season as they make the trip down to Austin, Texas, where they got that back blown out 42-14. So it is, of course, no secret that the San Diego State Aztecs have been off to a hot start, carrying an offense that scores more than 50 points a game. But a tough test is coming their way, though, when they take on the typical power in the Pac-12 Northwestern Division, the Washington Huskies, though. So an interesting battle on the way as it is considered a top 25 matchup. Of course, Washington Huskies trying to take a quick start and make it even quicker, as their quarterback Scott Johnson is going to run through a defender in order to have his 6th rushing touchdown of the season. So Washington is going to strike first, but will they strike last when it matters the most? Garrett Wicker is quickly able to respond for the Aztecs in order to get that explosive San Diego State offense on the board for the very first time in this game. And with a couple of field goals, are actually able to briefly take the lead. But how long does that lead last, though, as Washington is notorious for trying to do that ground and pound, but they're going to throw on 3rd down with Scott Johnson. He's got an open receiver, and he almost has a receiver in the end zone. Johnny Russell on his 3rd catch is dropped at the 1-yard line, but it does set up the Sean Terrell touchdown that allows the Washington Huskies to retake the lead. 1-point game now with 2 minutes left to play as Washington tries to finish the first half strong. Sean Terrell is going to break a couple of tackles. He's down the sideline, doesn't break a 3rd one, but gets across the 20-yard line, setting up another red zone opportunity for the Washington Huskies, as we'll have a throw over to the left-hand side. Scott Johnson trying to dot him in the corner, but San Diego State was ready for it after all. And now the Aztecs have a chance to take the lead with less than 1:30 left to play, and kicks up a good chunk of yards there in order to pick up the first down. However, nothing would really come out of it, so they're only going to get a field goal out of that particular play. And so San Diego State goes into half with the 19-17 lead. This is not the same offensive output that we've seen from the Aztecs in the first couple of games that they played, but so far it's working. They got the lead, and then they're going to extend the lead further as Tom O'Neal finds the end zone. Touchdown, Aztecs! We'll see if they go for the 2-point conversion. They decide not to, so it is a 9-point lead for San Diego State. As later on in the 3rd quarter, San Diego State does get yet another red zone opportunity. As now, 3rd and goal coming up. O'Neal dropping back the pass, and it's going to get dropped in the backfield by Roger Rollins, who has been a menace to society. That's his 3rd sack of the game. We'll see if he can pick up a 4th, but Tom O'Neal knows better than that, and he can get rid of the ball quickly. And so that leads to yet another touchdown for San Diego State. They'll also go for the 2-point conversion, and that is successful as well. So the Aztecs double up this number 17 ranked Washington squad. And so that means it all comes down to this 4th quarter of action right here. Washington in desperate need of a spark if they want to avoid dropping their 2nd game of the season already. 2nd and 4 coming up as Scott Johnson's going to hand it off to his main back, Sean Terrell, who's going to pick up a few more yards. It's been held pretty quiet in this one, less than 50 yards rushing, something that he is simply not accustomed to, but he's going to get those red zone opportunities as well, as that leads to yet another touchdown for the Washington Huskies, making it a 10-point game. Aztecs cannot answer back, so now with 5 minutes left in the game, Washington has a chance to cut this down to simply a 1-possession game. We'll see if they can capitalize. As now, 1st and goal from about the 10-yard line. Terrell hands it off to Sean Terrell once again, who finds the end zone. Touchdown, Huskies! And we got ourselves a ball game here once again. Less than 3 minutes left to play. Washington with a chance to retake the lead. And oh, baby, Corey Blair is able to expose the defense there. They needed that kind of play, and they definitely got it there. So let's see if Washington can at the very least tie it up. They're definitely in field goal range, but I'm sure they're not thinking about field goals. They want touchdowns, and they won't have to wait long as Micah Jack plunges into the end zone for the 2nd time today. And now the Aztecs must score a touchdown. Otherwise, it might be barbecue chicken they might be taking their first loss of the season. But Tom O'Neil, he's been in these situations before. He has plenty of experience. He knows how to run this offense. O'Neil on a 4th down needs 2 to make the game alive, and Tim Stallings comes through. Been out quiet today, even though Tom O'Neil has been throwing all over the yard, but makes the plays when it matters the most. And now the clock is still running. 10 seconds left. O'Neil finds the corner of the end zone. Touchdown, Aztecs. Tom O'Neil throws his 3rd touchdown of the game, and that final touchdown is the most important one. San Diego State is able to pull it out in a stunner, 41-38. That being said, we do have yet another top 25 matchup waiting for us. This one being in the Conference USA, as it is no secret that Navy has been tested early. Coming off of that big win back in week number 2 against the Florida State Seminoles. We'll now see this number 9 Navy squad take on number 11 Penn State, as Wesley Cole's actually going to set the school record for most receptions in a career. He has over 140 catches. And keep in mind, guys, we are still only in that 2nd game of the season. So, I mean, even if Navy doesn't experience any bowl games for whatever reason, I mean, this is a man that could easily shatter a school record like that. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. We'll jump into the 2nd quarter, though. They missed the extra point somehow, which is absolutely wild to me, but it is what it is. But Navy still got a 9-0 lead, even though they're not playing that same level of sharp football that they were playing with when we saw them in that week 2 game against Florida State. Now, granted, Penn State is a really good football team. They're ranked 11th in the country for a reason. So the fact that they are walking into Happy Valley and they're handling their business so far, even though they're not playing at that top level, it really lets you know that this Navy team, they came out and they meant business. As we got a 16-0 lead now, looking over to the right-hand side, and oh, baby, that was a hit. Oh, Mike Thompson took a shot, but he's still able to hang on to the football anyways. Still makes it a goal line situation, though, as Grant is going to fire over the middle. He'll end up finding Jason Anderson, not in the end zone, but it will be marked just shy at like the 1-yard line, as they'll hand it off once again to Kurt Barrett, and Kurt Barrett is going to find the end zone. That's another touchdown there for the midshipmen, as it looks like it's starting to get out of hand here, as Penn State just could not get anything going offensively, and defense certainly did not help either. Navy is going to run away with this in the 4th quarter, as the midshipmen get to 2-0, starting the year off with 2 top 15 victories. But now we'll check in on number 10 Iowa, going on the road to take on the Golden Gophers of Minnesota. Minnesota looking to bounce back after they lost pretty convincingly to the Michigan Wolverines, but now we're in American Conference play, and for all of these teams around the country, it's so important to handle your business in conference play if you want to go to the college football playoff, because as you may know, we now have this 14-team field that we have going on. So even though there is more independent spots that there are, still every conference does get at least one bid into the college football playoffs. So that's why it's important to handle your business in conference play. Games like this truly do matter in the grand scheme of things, and so far it seems like Minnesota is doing pretty well. They feel pretty happy that they are back in the Twin Cities for football action. Don't have to go into a hostile road environment or anything like that, but Iowa's handling it well. Last minutes of the first half, Iowa does have a chance to cut it down to just a field goal, and Drew Robinson, he wants to fire a shot over to the left-hand side, and he throws an interception. He wants the incompletion. I don't know what he was looking for, but that was simply not it. But Iowa does play a lot better in that second half, though, and this Iowa team is in a position to actually win this thing. They just got to get one more stop on defense. Dropping back, looking around and trying to find a receiver downfield. He actually does find number 89, Quinton Stevenson, for a 16-yard scamper, who's been having a big day today. 8 catches, 142 yards. He has been borderline unguardable throughout this entire ordeal, even though points have been so much more difficult to come by here in the second half. 30 seconds left to play, though, as quarterback makes some adjustments. Looking around, trying to step up in the pocket. Looks over to the left-hand side. It's intercepted! Diving throw, and it's over! The Iowa Hawkeyes are able to hold off Minnesota on the road as the Iowa Hawkeyes win by a field goal to start American Conference action. But while that final game that you saw was going on, we have some more studio updates from around the country. Starting with Oregon. The Oregon Ducks are able to win 24-19. So they'll wrap up non-conference play 3-0, but definitely having some questions, though, as we saw them barely beat Eastern Michigan. Houston will also start undefeated, though, as they beat North Texas, with Big 12 action starting to ramp up. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the country, the California Bears were able to bounce back after losing to UCF in the previous week. They beat Fresno State 28-16 on the road. And then also we have Arkansas losing once again. Now on a 2-game losing streak after a 5-point loss to their little brother in the state of Arkansas, as the Red Wolves get their first win of the season. Finally, to wrap things up here in week number 4, I believe, Rice is undefeated as well. They beat Texas Tech 34-31, as Rice is looking to jump back into that top 25 after being disrespected in the preseason. But we continue looking around the NCSL to see what happens for the rest of week number 4. This is a surprise. So Wisconsin fell out of the top 25 after their unfortunate defeat. Well, they rebound in a big way, get a big win at home against Nebraska. The Cornhuskers do suffer their first loss of the season. Meanwhile, the Miami Hurricanes will continue to remain undefeated, as Miami Hurricanes were able to take care of business against Southern Miss. Miami does end up winning 42-30 in a non-conference game. But after that, the Conference USA makes its presence felt as Pittsburgh wins their second game of the season. Not only do they beat Virginia Tech, but they also dominate Virginia Tech as well. A 28-point win that is sure going to increase the prestige of Conference USA. As for Maryland, the Maryland Terrapins actually get their second top 25 win of the season. They took down Northern Illinois couple of weeks ago, and now they do the same thing to their hated rivals in West Virginia. A defensive struggle that goes to Maryland. And then, of course, Ole Miss is going to remain undefeated for now, as they beat Memphis 38-26. That means you're defending national champions. Well, they have not lost since late in the regular season last year. But it ends up being a rather chaotic burst in terms of what we saw in the top 25 rankings, at least towards the bottom, right? So Navy continues to impress. They're up another couple of spots because they were able to beat Penn State convincingly. Ohio State, we'll see them shortly for the first time this year, as they'll take on Wisconsin. Wisconsin playing, coming off a big win against Nebraska in their big-time win. Clemson moves up a few spots. Nebraska, they fall down 6 spots to number 13. It was an overtime loss, so Nebraska definitely got punished, but it is what it is. Penn State moves down 3 spots. LSU up 4 after the blowout to Louisiana Tech. San Diego State moves up to number 16. Minnesota down 3, and then after that, bunch of different guys, a bunch of different teams coming into the top 25. Wisconsin is back in, and then we also have a few other newcomers, including Houston, who's undefeated, Notre Dame, who's also undefeated as well, Pittsburgh, who's undefeated, and then, well, not undefeated, but they got a good win off Virginia Tech, and then North Carolina, who started the season 3-0. And part of the reason why we saw that happen was Florida did lose to Coastal Carolina. That did happen in overtime. And then Hawaii, they had a surprising loss against Eastern Carolina of all teams, a team that is in towards that bottom tier of the ACC. So a bad loss for the Rainbow Warriors coming off of a playoff appearance. So let's get it on rolling over to week number 5 as we continue to see Georgia handle its business in conference play. They went to Atlanta, hot Atlanta, to take on the Georgia State Panthers, and GSU was not so hot, losing big 47-14. However, we will end up seeing Florida State get itself right back on track as they were able to earn their second win of the season by beating Georgia Tech 24-21. And a little bit of a surprise as well, UCLA was able to pull the upset on number 10 Oregon. Maybe this should show that UCLA is indeed a top 25 team. A lot still being decided this early in the season, but Oregon has its first loss. Meanwhile, keeping it out into the Pac-12, Washington is able to win their first Pac-12 game of the season as they're able to beat Stanford 31-14, Stanford losing their first conference game of the season. The Miami Hurricanes, however, going to the opposite side of the nation, they were in a little bit of a shootout against Mississippi State, or at least so it appeared. Miami jumped down to a 35-7 lead, and they simply never looked back. Now, as for LSU, they continued their winning ways in the Sun Belt as they're able to beat Memphis 45-28, forcing the Tigers to go 1-3 to start the season. Notre Dame makes an appearance in the top 25, and Notre Dame is going to stay in the top 25 for now, blowing out a winless Northwestern squad. In addition, College Game Day did end up going to Berkeley, California, and we had quite an entertaining game on our hands, but the number 1 team in the nation in USC was able to prevail after all. Michigan will also remain undefeated on the season as the Wolverines were able to beat USF 45-17. This should be the last non-conference game for Michigan. And a little bit of a shocker though, Colorado, who was off to that slow start, well, they might have a spark here after all. They stunned number 25 North Carolina in overtime, handing the Tar Heels their first loss of the year. And then, of course, the Ole Miss Rebels continue to roll, but there is no roll tide anymore. Alabama falls below 500 in the first 5 games of the season, falling to just 2-3. The Crimson Tide are officially down bad. But the biggest game of week number 5 is number 18 Wisconsin making a field trip up to Columbus, Ohio to take on this number 8 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes football team. Should be a pretty fun one, a battle of former Big Ten conference opponents now sitting in different conferences thanks to the geographic realignments that happened at the start of the NCSL. Jake Davis is going to have the first points of the game, though, an FCS transfer giving Wisconsin a quick 7-0 lead. However, Brooks Hicks, he has been in this Ohio State system for a while. He knows this offense, and that was evident in his level of comfort, able to lead a touchdown drive back in response to Wisconsin getting those very first points of the game, quickly shaping into what could potentially be a classic on our hands. As 2nd and 4 coming up, Brooks Hicks is actually going to keep it, breaks a tackle, and finds the end zone. Touchdown, Ohio State. And we got ourselves a tie ball game here once again, one that will remain tied in the closing moments of the first half as a 14-all game that could be broken wide open with this run right here. Michael Stooks, another FCS transfer, finds the end zone, and the Badgers are going to take the lead into the second half. Second half coming around, and it's still a tight ball game for sure, but Brooks Hicks, his handoff to Jonathan Sherman, is looking to change all of that. Sherman finding the end zone for Ohio State, and they'll even so much as take the lead into the fourth quarter, where champions truly are made. This is the type of games that can define a team's season. It really helps that at-large resume if you can't win a conference title. And both teams are just throwing haymakers at each other, and neither team is backing down either, as Jonathan Sherman gives Ohio State the lead with 2 minutes left to play. And now Wisconsin's gonna drive down the length of the field. 2 minutes left. Silva fires over the middle and finds Isaac Bell for a 14-yard scamper. He's starting to heat up as well. Let's see if they go right back to him. Silva in the shotgun, less than 1:55 to go. Dropping back, he's got time. Fires down the left-hand side, and he's gone. Like a girl in a country song, they do target Isaac Bell again. Touchdown, Badgers! And now Ohio State has to answer the bell as well. All the pressure on Brooks Hicks. But when you got pressure like this in a big-time environment, either you're a pipe that bursts or that pressure creates diamonds. What is Ohio State made of? Are they made up of diamonds? Or are they made up of broken pipes? 3rd and 5 in a critical situation. It's Hicks. Goes 5 wide. He's got time in the pocket. Looks over the left-hand side and makes the check down to Chad London, who gets out of bounds after picking up a gain of 10. So that does set up yet another 1st and 10 situation, as Hicks is going to be able to hand this ball up the middle, and he's going to hang on now. He's still on his feet, and Jonathan Sherman nearly finds the end zone. Sherman's going to be brought down at about the 2-yard line, where Ohio State takes his second time out. We'll see if they go back to Sherman, and sure enough, they will. Sherman finds the end zone, and it is a touchdown for Ohio State. You would think this would be the end, but then Wisconsin drives down the length of the field with 40 seconds left, sets up a small field goal, and we will be going into overtime after all. So 60 minutes was not enough to decide who is going to win this football game. So for the first time this season in a top 25 matchup, we will have an overtime game on our hands. Ohio State scores quickly as they start with the ball in the first overtime, putting all the pressure on Mark Silva, who now needs to lead his Wisconsin Badgers down the field. And they got to find the end zone here as well in order to make it double overtime. And sure enough, Silva facing a ton of pressure, but somehow dumps it off to Jake Davis. How did Mark Silva get out of that pressure? I have absolutely no idea, but what I do know is that was incredible. And now we're moving on to overtime number 2, where the Badgers this time around will start with the football in this second overtime, as Mark Silva drops back on this 3rd and 6 and finds his receiver wide butt naked open, as Mark Silva is going to set himself a school record for most touchdown passes in a single game. That is the 6th touchdown pass of the day. Where would this Wisconsin team be without Mark Silva at the helm today? I have absolutely no idea. So, if they can get one stop, then this game is over. But Bob Weber is going to get that 10 toes down. And we will now go into a 3rd overtime. This game is far from over. This time, Ohio State starting things out as they go back to the tight end, who still remains on his feet as Bob Weber forces him down at the 3-yard line. As now we got a goal line opportunity here in this 3rd overtime period. Hicks is going to hand it off to Jonathan Sherman, who finds the end zone. Touchdown, Ohio State, but this is where things change up a little bit. Now you have to go for the 2-point conversion. Let's see how Ohio State handles it, and sure enough, they go to the read option, and Brooks Hicks finds his way in. Now the pressure is back on this Wisconsin Badgers team once again. Wisconsin with a 2nd and 5 situation here in the 3rd overtime is going to hand it off to his tailback. He finds plenty of space to work through, as well as Daryl Miller is going to get inside the 10-yard line, where a couple of plays later, Silva drops back, throws to the right-hand side, and finds Adam Smith for the touchdown. They have to go for the 2-point conversion, but that's Mark Silva's 7th touchdown pass of the day. What's unfolding before our eyes is absolutely wild right now, and it's going to keep going. That's another 2-point conversion. Now we move on to a 4th overtime. This is absolutely insane. So 4 overtimes now coming up as Adam Smith scores once again for the Wisconsin Badgers, with Mark Silva now with 8 touchdown passes, and he also sets a school record for most passing yards in a game, a record that he happened to set last year. And most importantly out of all that, they're at 69 points right now. That's very nice if I say so myself. Going for the 2-point conversion though, Mark Silva drops back, faces pressure, and it's incomplete. So Ohio State has to score a touchdown, but they can get the 2-point conversion. They can win this game. We can all go home. So we'll see what happens here. A pivotal drive for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Hicks in the shotgun formation, sets up the option, is gonna, no, he pitches at the last second to Jonathan Sherman. I would have kept it myself, but good decision otherwise. Could have been a little bit on the risky side, but it still leads in 6 points. Now they're 2 yards away from ending this thing once and for all. Hicks fires to the right hand side. Touchdown, Ohio State. It's over. It's over. Ohio State wins. Oh my, what a classic on our hands. 140 points scored. That's gotta be the game of the series, man. Absolutely incredible. While all of that was happening though, we get studio updates from all around the country. The ranked teams in the Pac-12 all handle business. Oregon State hosting Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan nearly beating Oregon last week. They almost beat Oregon State here, but that still means they're going to be 1-3. And then we get more studio updates. Number 24, Florida State wins. Arizona also wins their second game of the season. And then finally, we have the battle of the skillets between SMU and TCU, and SMU able to get some revenge after not being able to win this rivalry game the last couple of years. They win 21-17. So with that said, we did have the majority of the what we saw with the chaos that happens in the previous week. It was contained to the bottom part of the top 25. Oregon does fall 7 spots down to number 17 in the country. They'll take on Hawaii. And then also happening in the bottom parts of the top 25, we do have UCLA back. I'm not surprised by this at all because they were able to pull off that big win against Oregon. North Carolina is out because they were shocked by Colorado. And then Wisconsin is still hanging in there tough, losing 6 spots, even though it was a quadruple overtime loss. Felt like them falling down to number 24 in the country might have been a little harsh. But with that said, we check in on one of the first military academy matchups of the season within week number 6. Navy took on Air Force as part of that Commanders-in-Chief's trophy title race, and Navy was able to win, but not as much as expected. Jake Jacobs is starting to slowly but surely turn the Air Force culture around. It just hasn't turned into wins yet. Navy wins by 10 points, but Air Force gave a respectable showing. In other news, the Texas Longhorns are going to remain undefeated on the season, as this should be one of their last non-conference games. They blow out Arizona State by 35 in order to get to 5-0 on the season. And then we get a huge upset out in the Conference USA. Rutgers, who was previously a top 25 team, well, they might be switching places with Pittsburgh here as Rutgers wins 29-17. That does mean the Panthers will drop their Conference USA opener. But one of the biggest early games in week number 6 that we do have is number 13 Penn State making the trip all the way across the country to take on number 18 Washington. And the fact that these two teams, they're going to be in the same conference this upcoming football season in real life is absolutely insane to me because they're in completely opposite time zones. But you know what? I don't control like conference realignments in real life. I wish I did, though, I'll tell you what. But we got a pretty good game on our hands. This is part of a home-and-home that Penn State and Washington have been doing the last couple of seasons, where Washington previously made the trip to Penn State in year number 4, and now it's Penn State's turn to do the exact same thing. So far, it doesn't seem like they left Happy Valley, though, have they? Because here we are, Penn State has a 14-0 lead already over the over this Washington team, and they could extend this lead even bigger. They could quickly make this a 21-0 lead, And sure enough, they will with Corey Shelby. Penn State up 21-3. They have been looking nothing short of dominant, looking to prove that letdown that they had against Navy. They're trying to prove that what that was nothing other than a complete fluke. You know, Penn State usually so much better than that, and they are showing it right now on the field, as here we are midway through the third quarter, this Nittany Lions team in a spot to where they could run away with this game. And sure enough, after this particular touchdown, they will definitely be doing that. Penn State handles its business. They bounce back. They win big against Washington here. But before we go ahead and get into the other top 25 game that we had, there was some other games that did feature top 25 teams that were nationally televised for week number 6. One of them was Wisconsin. They were able to shake off that emotionally charging loss to Ohio State. They were able to bounce back and beat Iowa State 38-24 in order to keep themselves in the top 25. Also, Miami was actually a surprisingly tough fight against Georgia State. Georgia State seems like quite a few times in this series they've been close to pulling off that signature win, but close only counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and nuclear missiles. The Hurricanes remain undefeated. Michigan, on the other hand, was able to steamroll the Bearcats at Nippert Stadium. Michigan wins by 39 and also remains undefeated. Could move ahead of Miami. As for Ole Miss, they are now 6-0 on the campaign as they are able to beat South Alabama 30-21 in a close Sun Belt matchup. Florida State was also able to beat Maryland. Maryland is a surprising team to me. Maryland has those 2 top 25 wins, and they're 2-1 against top 25 teams, but in the games that they're supposed to beat, they fumbled the bag a little bit. So Maryland, yes, they pulled off a couple of upsets, but you could definitely see their season being a little better than what it currently is. But how about this one, though? South Carolina football might actually be back. South Carolina destroys Georgia 48-24. This is the first regular season loss that Georgia has suffered in the last couple of years. Meanwhile, the Oregon Ducks, man, they were pushed to the brink, but Oregon was able to hang on and win 27-21. The Hawaii Rainbow Warriors, who had such lofty expectations after going to the playoff last year, now just 1-4. They are effectively cooked this year if they can't get it together in conference play. Things will not get much easier in the Pac-12 because USC still resides in this conference. They blow out Nevada 38-10, and so the Wolfpack of Nevada are still seeking their first Pac-12 win here in season number 5. But one of the most important games of week number 6 that could unfold is this Nebraska and Minnesota game. Minnesota, playing its 3rd top 25 game of the season already. It just goes to show just how brutal Minnesota's early schedule has been. And Nebraska is no easy out themselves, right? Yes, they do have an early loss, but Nebraska has a very good football team, and if they make it into this college football playoff, Nebraska can be a dangerous contender. With their offensive coordinator George Gentry sticking around after receiving some head coaching offers because he felt like there was unfinished business here. He wanted to make sure the program was in a better place than where he found it. That's why he didn't leave, past couple of years. And if he wants to make that happen, winning this game is going to go an extremely long way, because I'll tell you what, this game right here usually does decide who goes to the American Conference Championship game, because these two teams are in the same division, and these two teams, at least in this series, have been really good squads. First and goal coming up as they'll throw over the middle and finds his man in the end zone. Touchdown, Minnesota. Steve Brink off to a better start than what we saw in the last couple of weeks. Brink also has his guys up 14-7, but he's also going to throw an interception here with less than 2 minutes left to play in this first half. So now Nebraska has a chance to tie things up. Looking around, Cornelius Reed is going to dump it off to Pierre Nelson. Nelson is able to get out of bounds. So that will save some critical time on the clock as they are effectively running that 2-minute drill. As Reed will drop back yet again, throws over to the left-hand side, and he does find Jonathan Wiley for another 18-yard scamper, and also getting out of bounds as well. Doing a great job running this 2-minute offense, but it is this running game that might ultimately take them home, though, as 2nd and goal coming up. Reed is going to drop back one more time. No, he's going to hand it off to Nelson, who breaks the tackle, and he is off to the races. Touchdown, Nebraska. And we got a tie ball game on our hands. 14-all is now going to be your score as Minnesota tries to retake the lead, but the Nebraska defense has been coming up big today as well. That is the 3rd interception that they have been able to force, and it's a big reason why Nebraska has been in this game, even though the offense has kind of been hit or miss, but Cornelius Reed has done a very good job taking care of the football. You know, not necessarily being the reason why they're winning, I would say, but he's also not the reason why Nebraska is going to lose this game as well. He's a high floor, low ceiling type of quarterback, I would say. At least, you know, in my experiences of watching him in gameplay so far. But Minnesota is going to take the lead, though, with 8 minutes left, and they hold on to it even deep in this 4th quarter. Cornelius Reed now has to lead a touchdown drive. It's a make-or-break drive, possibly for the season for Nebraska, and Cornelius Reed is going to answer with this sidestep of a throw. Incredible play by Travis Wiggins. And now it's all knotted up at 31, and depending on what happens here, we might be having overtime once again, and it's intercepted, but does not lead to any points. So we will have overtime here yet again. Let's see what this overtime holds for us, though, as Reed drops back the pass, looks over the middle, makes a good throw there yet again, and it is good for a 20-yard scamper. Reed feeling himself here in the overtime period, but can they punch it in? 3rd and goal, they do find Blake Thomas wide butt naked open on the slant pattern. So Nebraska will take the lead. And now we'll see if they can keep Minnesota out of the end zone. And on a 3rd and 10, they give up the middle of the field, which is just barbecue chicken, even in these CPU type games. And yeah, Minnesota's going to force a 2nd overtime. They get a field goal in 2nd overtime, but Nebraska can't capitalize. So they bring their field goal unit out as well, and the kick is missed. The field goal is no good, and Minnesota is going to be able to walk this off. Wow, what a finish. Unfortunately, it came down to the kicker. The kicker does fold, and needless to say, Minnesota now controls its own destiny in the American Conference. So with that being said, we have other American Conference games going, like Eastern Michigan pulling the upset off of Missouri, and Iowa handling Kansas convincingly as well. One more studio update that we also got was Buffalo being able to beat Temple, Buffalo winning their 2nd game of the year. So we are already halfway through the season, and we do have quite a few teams that are receiving first place votes. The best of the teams that are not receiving a first place vote right now, though, is Army. Army, with a 3-touchdown win against James Madison, they were able to climb all the way up to number 6. They even climbed past like the Michigans, Iowas, and Ohio States of the world. So that was very intriguing to see. We do also have some other muscle movements like San Diego State. They continue to impress, and they'll have a big test against USC in week number 7, one that could decide the Pac-12 Pacific Division. Also, Minnesota getting a little bit of a bump themselves. They move up 2 spots to number 14. Troy is up 5 to 15 in the nation. Houston is up 4. South Carolina Their win against Georgia has huge implications on the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs fall 15 spots all the way down to number 18 in the country. Makes Nebraska feel a little bit better considering they lost in double overtime to a ranked team and fell 7 spots as well. Rounding out your group is Rice. Rice is entering the top 25. They are now 4-0 on the season. And you got Wyoming, who enters the top 25 for the first time, but I think in this series. They're off to a 5-0 start here in year number 5. But now let's go ahead and get week number 7 officially underway with some good old Red River rivalry action. Oklahoma comes in a couple of games under 500, but they gave it the old college try. Kept up with the Texas Longhorns for 3 quarters, but then Texas pulled away in that 4th and final quarter in order to remain undefeated on the season. Meanwhile, the Miami Hurricanes had another close call, this time against the Utes of Utah, taking Miami to the brink, but some 4th quarter heroics with less than 3 minutes left to go continues to have Miami having a perfect season. As for the Ole Miss Rebels, they once again win another game, this time against the Auburn Tigers on the road, mind you, and that is even with Auburn's strong 4th quarter finish. Ole Miss is now 7-0 and remaining unbeaten on the season. However, up in North Carolina, we had ourselves a shootout of the century. This was not even finished in overtime. This was completed in regulation. Clemson puts up 63. They didn't blow out North Carolina in spite of that, but they do win and remain undefeated on the season. Of course, another caveat is the Army Black Knights also trying to remain unbeaten as well, and they will, courtesy of a 35-24 victory over the Scarlet Knights. Rutgers falls back to 500, while Army also continues its unbeaten season. For the Houston Cougars, they're also looking to be unbeaten, and they get it done in a different way. More of a defensive-minded battle, but Houston is now 6-0 and should find itself in the top 15 when we revisit the polls next week. As for the LSU Tigers, they win another game, this time outside of conference play for the first time. Yes, this is a non-conference game in the NCSL environment. LSU beats Florida 45-31 as the Gators suffer their 3rd loss of the season. As for UAB, they will have the pleasure of taking their first loss of the season, losing to the Georgia Bulldogs 52-14. Georgia able to bounce back pretty easily after the shocker that they had against South Carolina last week. And of course, Notre Dame will probably fall out of the top 25 as they end up getting shocked in Morgantown by none other than the West Virginia Mountaineers. Notre Dame drops their first game of the season, and they do it within MAC conference play. Now, with that being said, Iowa has been one of those very intriguing teams to watch all of a sudden. Iowa not getting a lot of attention in the preseason, but at 5-0, they do find themselves ranked in the top 10 all of a sudden, but they are taking on Wisconsin, where Wisconsin a couple of weeks ago, they are coming off of that heartbreaking loss to Ohio State, which had them lose in 4 overtimes that saw 140 points scored. So we'll see how Wisconsin is able to bounce back because, man, if they want to remain ranked, they need this win. They absolutely need this win. And this is also another one of those games that can decide what goes down in the American Conference because Iowa, Wisconsin, they're also in the same division and they're both undefeated in American Conference play. So whoever does come out on top and win this game is going to control their own destiny to get to the American Conference Championship at the end of the season as well. So big game here for both teams, and they're both playing like it as well. Could be another exciting one, even though Mark Silva has not been the most accurate quarterback today. You saw it on the bottom of the screen, just 10 for 25. Still finding a way to make plays, and so in this receiver right here. Imagine a world where we see Iowa, of all teams, actually have an offense. Imagine that concept. Sometimes it might only happen in a video game, but hey, it is how it is. So as Drew Robinson, he's going to get his guys quickly up to the line at the 1 yard line, wants to take advantage, and they will. Kyle Wall is going to score, and Iowa's going to take the lead back. So we could be in for yet another classic on our hands involving this Wisconsin team. Just really been in some barn burners, haven't they? 3rd and short will be coming up, though, for Wisconsin as they try to get a little spicier, trying to go for it here. Silva's just going to take it himself, and no one accounts for the quarterback. So that turns into an easy scamper for the veteran quarterback as Wisconsin is able to nod things up once again. But later on in the 3rd quarter, though, Iowa in a chance with an opportunity to try and retake that lead yet again. As now we're looking at a 3rd and goal. Robinson dropping back, got some time, looks over to right-hand side, and Sean Vane is going to score. Touchdown, Iowa. Drew Robinson, he certainly knows a thing or two about trying to drive it into those tight holes. No diddy, as that will give Iowa the lead into the 4th quarter. As now, 4th down coming up. Silva looks over the middle, finds Isaac Bell, who gets lit up like a Christmas tree. Still able to hang on to that ball anyways. And now it's a goal line situation where they go into their power package. And those yards by Michael Stooks, make no mistake, those were some hard-earned yards right there, but still made it happen anyways. We're knotted up at 28 apiece. So, 6 minutes left to play here in Iowa. Again, looking to answer the call. Wisconsin offense is getting hot, so you know a field goal might not cut it. 2nd and 2. Robinson is able to get the outside leverage and finds the end zone. Touchdown, Iowa! And it's now 35-28 your score. So Wisconsin desperately needing some points. They need a big drive out of their star quarterback, Mac Silva. 3rd and 4 coming up, though, as Iowa looking to lock in. Silva fires inside, and Jake Davis able to maintain concentration and make the catch. He is nearly up to 150 yards receiving. But with less than a minute left, Silva fires to the left inside. It's intercepted! It's intercepted! He could kneel this. They would probably end the game anyways. But better to be safe than it is to be sorry, because he is going to take it all the way back. Mike Ray is going to crib it to the distance, and that will continue Iowa's hot streak in year number 5. They take down Wisconsin on the road. Speaking of some teams that are on some hot streaks right now, San Diego State still undefeated, but now they take on the power of the Pac-12, the USC Trojans, number 1 in college football right now. This has always been the big gateway to get into the Pac-12 championship. It always runs through USC, and it looks like here in year number 5, it might not be no different in the Pac-12 hierarchy, as James Redd is going to find himself in the end zone. USC will take that 7-0 lead, and they're going to build off of it, because towards the end of the 1st quarter, this time Victor Spence is in the game. He was hurt on the 1st drive, able to find Brian Thompson. So good job by the backup quarterback holding things down and really just kind of putting San Diego State on that back foot right now. They're able to score every once in a while, but it's not always about scoring. You got to make some big plays in critical moments, and that was certainly one of those big plays, able to hold USC in the red zone without allowing them to score. That's always a critical way that you could find yourself giving yourself a chance to beat USC. It requires an A performance to beat these guys. Because I'll tell you this, USC is one of those teams that rarely beats itself, as Kurt Fields is going to find the end zone. Touchdown for the Aztecs. And we got it cut down to just a 1-possession game. Late in the 3rd quarter, though, as James Redd still remains in the game. Hopefully Victor Spence is okay, but they're not really missing Victor Spence all that much, because James Wren is going to fire his third passing touchdown and keep San Diego State at arm's length, handing the Aztecs their very first loss of the season. With that said, while we were wrapping up the USC San Diego State matchup, we do get some studio updates as Hawaii finally does win their second game. This is the first time since week 2, I believe, when they beat Boston College, that they were actually able to go about winning a game. Imagine that. In other news, though, both Oregon and Troy get upset, which could create some serious shakeups in the top 25 polls. But to close out the action in week number 7, we do have a couple of more games that did feature top 25 teams. Ohio State is one of them, and they were able to beat Purdue 27-21 in a close one. And then we do have this little upset that we have here. A minor upset, I would say, because Cal definitely should get some consideration at this point to be ranked. Cal wins 38-31 and hands UCLA their second loss of the season. Now, we did end up reaching that halfway point in the season, so I figured it was a good time just to give a general picture of how each of the conferences are doing. Starting in alphabetical order, we got the ACC, and in the ACC, there's 3 teams that, have been doing really well. Clemson, Virginia, which is actually a pretty nice surprise. They just entered the top 25, and Virginia Tech are all undefeated, with Charlotte putting together a nice season as well. And the American got a couple of undefeated teams with Iowa and Bowling Green, but keep an eye out for Minnesota, Missouri, and Wisconsin. All 3 of those teams can also make a run for the title. In the Big 12, it seems like it's going to turn into a pretty good race this year, as a lot of teams that are still realistically in it, Houston, Texas, and Baylor are all still undefeated, and then even teams like SMU, TCU, Texas A&M, and Rice, Food is even in this Big 12 title race. In the Big 10, lots of teams involved in the Big 10 as well, with Ohio State, Michigan, the Miami Redhawks, and Michigan State all undefeated. You even have teams like Cincinnati, Indiana, Kent State, Akron, and Purdue all just 1 game behind. Meanwhile, in Conference USA, it looks like it might come down between Army and Navy, but a bunch of one-loss teams here that still have a shot at this and could play a little bit of spoiler as well. Meanwhile, in the MAC is looking a little bit different, with teams like Illinois and Louisville at the top, as is Mid-Tennessee State, so could have some different representatives from the MAC this year. Although Notre Dame, who's been historically good, as well as even Vanderbilt and West Virginia, both certainly still in things as well. However, for the Mountain West actually has multiple ranked teams right now. Colorado State leading the pack, ranked number 20 in the entire country at the moment. Wyoming is also ranked here. They at least they were ranked, but they just suffered their first loss of the season. Still in the Mountain West race though. The Pac-12, however, seems like it's going to be one of the toughest conferences in college football. USC is on top of them all, though. They look like a shoo-in, and it's just going to be a matter of who's going to come out of that Northwestern division, whether it be a California, an Oregon, or even a Oregon State or Washington. That Northwest division is something to watch. In the SEC, got a 2-way tie for first, which includes Miami and Georgia. Florida State, who hasn't played too many conference games, is still well in this race as well. Coastal Carolina and UAB are intriguing teams to watch though. And finally, in the Sun Belt, looks like it's going to be a 3-team race here. Ole Miss and LSU, who met for the Sun Belt Championship last season, but Troy is going to try to mix things up here. Thought they might be a year away, but Troy is trying to make some noise right here in season number 5. So in week number 8, there actually was not any top 25 matchups to really sit in on, but that doesn't mean there wasn't any top 25 intriguing games just in general. Michigan is going to remain undefeated, but man, did they have a close call against Purdue. They actually needed a strong 4th quarter finish where they came back and win by 10. A last-second field goal allows the Wolverines to avoid the upset. As for San Diego State, they still continue their excellent season as they go on the road to take down Alabama. The Crimson Tide having one of the worst seasons in recent memory, as the Tide now fall to just 3-5 on the season. As for the Georgia Bulldogs, they're able to bounce back and they beat Tennessee 48-31. The Bulldogs only have one loss on the season and they're undefeated in SEC conference play. Speaking of the SEC, we check in on Miami. The Miami Hurricanes also cruising through the regular season as Miami beats Georgia Tech 35-16. Now, after Notre Dame was going off on its 5-game winning streak, well, that's not going to last too much longer. USC is going to hand Notre Dame its second consecutive loss as USC wins a close one, 32-28. And then, of course, we have the Mountain West. The Mountain West has been surprisingly interesting to watch. Wyoming was ranked in the top 25, but that will be a far cry from where they're at now as they drop their second straight game against a ranked Colorado State team who is also undefeated. Virginia Tech beats North Carolina 40-34, but they'll need overtime to get it done. The Hokies should move up into the top 20 as North Carolina is better than what their record suggests. But the biggest story of week number 8 was the Keystone Pipeline rivalry game, and Pittsburgh was able to win out. They beat Penn State 31-28. A big-time win for the Panthers as Pittsburgh puts themselves in a better position to go to the Conference USA Championship. Meanwhile, keeping it out in the Midwest, Ohio State is able to beat Michigan State 41-31 in a barn burner. The Ohio State Buckeyes remain undefeated. And rounding out your notable games, LSU is able to dispatch Old Dominion 37-14. The Monarchs were not able to score until the fourth quarter when backups were applied into the game. So we have a little bit more than a month left in the regular season, and for right now, we still have 10 undefeated teams left in the NCSL. We have, of course, your top 9, which does include Houston. That could be tested by Texas A&M, by the way. We also have Colorado State that's ranked in the top 25 as well. Army is in here. Army is a team that just lost its first game of the season. A Maryland team that was unranked, but hey, Maryland was able to prove itself against some of the big boys in the NCSL. So Maryland, we're going to see them in a little bit. In terms of other news and notable movements, Navy loses big. They lose big to Stanford by 3 possessions. It knocks them down 15 spots in the top 25. Penn State also moves down 9 spots as well. And so that means there's no surprises here in that Pittsburgh actually does become ranked at number 22 in the country. Also getting ranked is UCLA. They are back in. They're going to play against San Diego State in a little bit. Maryland, who got that win against Army, and then Texas A&M, they won a close one against Rice. They will be hosting the Houston Cougars. Should be a good top 25 matchup in the Big 12, but we did lose 4 teams. Oregon got blown out by Fresno State. Virginia loses a shootout to Lake Forest. Cal actually loses to Washington State. That's a big win for Remington Natalia. And of course, you got Washington, who was ranked in the top 25, but they drop another game, this time to Nevada. Washington not only outside the top 25, but they're also under 500. They're just 3-4 on the season. So it's a miracle that they even stayed in there for as long as they did, to be honest. But for the very first time in the last couple of weeks, we do have a couple of top 25 games on our hands. The first one being number 9 Houston making the trip to Kyle Field, where Texas A&M just finds itself in the top 25, coming in number 25 in the nation. Texas A&M, of course, looking for that signature win. They've kind of been rebuilding themselves the last few years. It's been a horrendous last couple of years for Texas A&M, but they might be back. But Houston might have some other things to say about it, though, as with less than 3 minutes into the game, Houston is going to take a pick 6 to the crib, as that is how the first points are going to happen. Imagine that, Texas A&M in a spot to score, and then they completely fold, not executing that screen very well at all. Michael Harrell probably should have just threw one into the dirt because they were really tracking that one extremely well. But Texas A&M is able to recover after that, though, able to score 17 unanswered after that pick six. And all of a sudden, Houston is kind of the team that's pressing a little bit more, trying to find that rhythm before we go into halftime. And maybe they find something here because Seth Browning is able to score. We have a 3-point game at half. Now, the closeness does remain for the majority of the second half, but Houston is able to take the lead for the first time since they were up 7-0 with 6:30 left to play in that first quarter. And not only will they score one touchdown that third quarter, they're also going to score a second one with Aaron Brown able to dive into the red zone as well. So Houston really starting to take control, showing that this Houston team, hey, they might be for real because, yes, they are 7-0, but this is the toughest team that Houston has played so far this season. And so far, they do seem to be passing with flying colors, aren't they? Houston is going to be able to score yet another touchdown. And with 1 minute left to play, it does seem like this game is going to go Houston's way. But I do appreciate the Aggies fighting this in the end. They get a garbage time score with 60 seconds left. Still doesn't change the fact that Houston remains undefeated. However, can San Diego State bounce back after they lose a couple of weeks ago to USC? Because yes, USC did lose. That is something that did indeed happen. But a couple of slip-ups by USC and you could find yourself back in it. UCLA, your champions from back in year number 3, though, they got something to say about that, though. Trying to keep themselves in the top 25 themselves, and UCLA has a chance to make this a runaway early as they're already up 14-0, and they're already putting together yet another drive as the sophomore Kenji Kobayashi able to get the reception, able to find some extra space in the wide receiver room while waiting for Brandon Hollis to graduate, as UCLA is able to take a 21-0 lead. As now we're going to see Tom O'Neal trying to work its magic because, oh baby, do they need some magic right now. If the Aztecs are not careful, this is going to get out of hand very quickly, and UCLA, at least in game, hard place to come into and actually get a win. So, next couple of drives are going to be very important. First drive ends in a touchdown, they get a stop, and then they throw yet another touchdown in the corner of the end zone. So, just like that, it didn't take very long to do. San Diego State is right back in this thing, and they could tie it, but instead, Tom O'Neal is going to throw an interception. And that was a big reason why it got out of hand in the first place. You kind of saw that turnover the turnover differential. Wow, words are extremely hard all of a sudden. Yeah, UCLA has a 3-0 turnover advantage. And on that last turnover, they're going to try to take advantage of it. And they will with 2 seconds left in the half. Melvin Moore, the FCS transfer, finds his way into the end zone. It's a score for the Bruins. So 28-14 now becomes your score. And so here we are in the second half. And we got to see what San Diego State is made of. Because they ran into some adversity for the first time this season when you do end up seeing them down like they were against USC. And they weren't really able to handle it that well. So we're going to see if they handle this adversity a little bit differently. And sure enough, with 6 minutes left to play, it seems like this time they actually do respond a lot better because Tom O'Neal is going to throw his third touchdown pass of the game. And all of a sudden, we got a tied one on our hands. 2:20 left to play. Tom O'Neal has a clean pocket. He's going to throw over the middle. He's got his receiver in Blake Gunn. He's going to gun him down into the red zone. where a few plays later, O'Neal, with another clean pocket, throws a dot to Blake Gunn once again. And that is going to give San Diego State the final push to victory. The Aztecs, down by so much, win by a little. So that was a little midweek appetizer for us, but on Saturday we have some very interesting results for week number 9. How about USC taking on Hawaii? The Rainbow Warriors desperately needed a win, and that urgency played out well. The Rainbow Warriors stun the number 1 team in the nation. We'll have a new number 1 team when the next AP poll comes out. In addition, Penn State was able to bounce back against the Temple Owls, winning 42-32, but Nittany Lions are now officially bowl eligible and can stay in the top 25. That said, LSU continues to roll through Sun Belt Conference play, able to take down Arkansas State 45-24 to cement their top 10 status. Ohio State will also roll in their conference matchup against the Toledo Rockets. They ran out of fuel early as the Rockets only put up a field goal in their interstate matchup. However, the Minnesota Golden Gophers have lost to Missouri 45-23. Minnesota drops their 3rd game, and the American Conference Championship race suddenly becomes a lot more interesting. Meanwhile, the Miami Hurricanes continue to handle business in the regular season as Miami now gets to 8-0 after a 40-16 win over UCF. And rounding out your nationally televised games that feature top 25 teams, Clemson is going to remain undefeated as well, blowing out NC State on the road 38-10. So that does mean we do have a brand new top 25 team, or new number 1 team in the nation, actually. Ole Miss is now in at number 1, and that list of undefeateds does shrink. We're now officially down to 9 teams that are still undefeated on the college football season. USC, suffering their first loss of the year, drops 10 spots, and rightfully so, as Hawaii does have a down year on its hands so far. Colorado State continues to, beat the teams on their schedule. They're up 2 spots to number 15 in the nation as well. And then towards the back end of things, Minnesota drops 11 spots. They're down to number 22 in the nation. Missouri does get in at number 23. And then Memphis is actually replacing UCLA. Memphis is now ranked in the top 25, coming in at 5-3 on this season, but below 500 in Sun Belt Conference play. So now let's get ourselves going into week number 10, and we start with another battle in the Buckeye State, one that Ohio State is also easily going to take care of. It's a 49-20 victory against the Ohio Bobcats, and in Thomas Hammock Jr.'s first season as a head coach of the Bobcats, his team needs to win 4 games in a row just to become bowl eligible. As for Virginia Tech, they're able to dominate against Boston College 45-17. Boston College's season is now effectively over, while Virginia Tech continues to prove that they are a playoff caliber team once again. The Battle of Paul Bunyan's Axe was an interesting game as well, though. Michigan State was not given a prayer, but almost pulls off the upset on the road. However, the Wolverines will remain undefeated. In the new Iowa of the NCSL, Missouri was in a low-scoring affair against Iowa State. All of the scoring happens in the 3rd quarter, where Missouri was able to take the lead with 1 minute left in the 3rd quarter and never looked back after that. Meanwhile, USC is coming off of its first loss of the season, and they came out playing absolutely pissed, beating the dog shit out of Fresno State. USC wins 49-3 to get back to those winning ways. As for this rivalry game between Navy and Notre Dame, remember when Notre Dame was 5-0? Well, they have been on a 4-game losing streak since then, and that includes a 26-point loss to Navy here in front of the South Bend faithful. But that said, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for top 25 teams, as number 13 Georgia is going to go down for the 2nd time this season. Octavian Cador had an amazing game with 2 passing touchdowns in the 2nd quarter, and it wills the Florida Gators to their 7th win of the season. And then on top of that, Syracuse was able to save its season for now, being able to beat Penn State on a last-second touchdown. The Orange are still alive, but need the win. 3 more games in a row. And of course, the Texas Longhorns continuing to roll through the Big 12 Conference, beating Texas A&M 56-17. So Houston's the only team that stands in its way now. Texas is always undefeated here. But in week number 10, we have ourselves a big-time matchup that I wasn't sure if we were going to end up seeing. Number 1 Ole Miss, your defending national champions, are going to take on the Troy Trojans, who happen to be here ranked number 17 in the nation. Greg Jenkins, I thought he was going to have a rushing touchdown there, but instead, he fumbles it down by the goal line. That is a tough pill to swallow. But Jenkins is going to bounce back quickly, though, because late in the first quarter, he's going to throw his touchdown pass, and it helps him set a career record for most touchdown passes in a career. 99 touchdowns. He could literally become the first quarterback in Troy football history to throw 100 touchdown passes in a career. Would be a high watermark of excellence that's trying to be built here at the University of Troy. But with that being said, what's even bigger news is that the defending national champions, undefeated, have not really been tested this year. Well, they're finally facing some adversity here, down by 10, and Chad Heath is going to respond there, firing a touchdown pass of his own. But later on in the second quarter, Troy's going to set up a little screen, and Justin Franklin's going to be able to get loose. That's a touchdown for the Troy Trojans there, as Greg Jenkins is absolutely feeling himself so much so that not only does Troy win this game, that's not even the most surprising part. Troy's going to dominate in this game, and yes, Ole Miss cuts it to within 7, but let's be honest, Troy was absolutely dominating for most of that game, so a huge shocker there. Troy continues to control its own destiny in the Sun Belt. Imagine that. But now we got to shift our focus here in one of the biggest rivalry games of the season. Miami, 8-0 Miami, traveling to Tallahassee to take on this 5-2 Florida State squad. And this is a game that is a must-win for Florida State if they have college football playoff aspirations. You know, a third loss is going to really hurt any reasonable shot of getting an at-large bid. And then, of course, Miami will essentially clinch the SEC, a trip to the SEC championship as well, if Miami wins this game. It's not confirmed, but essentially would be the case. As Tyrell Smoochie Wallace, one of your guys' customs, well, we're going to have a custom connection here, as Trevor Venan's going to find the end zone for the second time today. And so Miami finds itself up 14-7. So we'll see what Florida State can do in the closing moments of this first half, as we now get to about midfield. Seminoles looking to pass the ball yet again, having some time in the pocket. It's going to fire over the middle and finds Ty Gold for a nice 14-yard scamper, as Terrence Garcia, while hasn't really pushed the ball downfield all that much, he has been efficient, completing 14 of his first 16 passes. And now he's really starting to open up that offense as well, because he is pushing down this ball down the field more. He's able to find his spots down the field more, as Ty Gold finds the end zone. Touchdown, Seminoles! And we got ourselves a tie ball game. So 14-all is your score as we go into this third quarter of action, as Travis Beach is going to be able to find the end zone for the touchdown, as Florida State will have its first lead of the game. Going into the fourth quarter, though, Trevor Veeden did hurt himself, so the backup quarterback is in the game and throws this interception with 7 minutes left. He tried to put his receiver in a position to where maybe we could have a mossing situation, but the reverse happened, and now Florida State has a chance to take the lead, and they will. Garcia finds the end zone. Touchdown, Seminoles! And Florida State will hang on and win a big one in the SEC. 28-21 as Miami drops its first game of the year. Speaking of games being dropped, Oregon drops another one.
Remember when Oregon was ranked? I remember that. Those were some good times. Well, Nevada won there, and then Oregon State is also able to beat California, so Cal needs to wait a little bit longer to get bowl eligible. We do also see Hawaii beat Washington. Washington, another team that I thought would be a lot better, but at 4-5, they're in danger of possibly missing a bowl game. And then USF gets back to 500 as they take down Florida Atlantic 28-24. So now we're starting to get to a point where the undefeated teams are starting to whittle themselves down here a little bit. We are now down to 6 undefeated teams with losses incurred by Ole Miss and Miami. Real excited to see if Troy can hang on and make it to that Sun Belt Championship game, if that indeed does end up happening. Florida State does get a nice boost. They move up a few spots to number 13 in the country. Troy only gets 2 spots though, so Troy is getting disrespected still. But it doesn't change the fact that Troy has a pretty good football team. And, you know, like Florida State and Nebraska, they might be, like, shivering their boots a little bit, because Troy should move up ahead of those other 2 teams if Troy does end up going ahead and continuing to win out. So, just some things that surprised me a little bit. Navy, Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh also move up. Georgia falls 6 spots. Thankfully, Florida hops into the top 25 for the for this week's alliteration of the top 25. And then we got a few newcomers. Florida's in at 23, Virginia at 24, and Colorado State still hanging in there, but they suffered their first loss of the season. They drop a game against Louisiana Monroe for 28-31. So a hard pill to swallow here for the Colorado State Rams, but they're still in. We did see Penn State lose to Syracuse, and then Maryland actually loses to Rutgers. It was a close game, but, you know, Maryland it's an interesting team. Maryland, you know, if they underperform against teams they're supposed to beat, but then in games they're not supposed to win, Maryland overperforms. It's just they're one of the most confusing teams that I think are out there right now in this NCSL, at least here in season number 5. So in week 11, the only top 25 game that we have is this early matchup between Army and Pittsburgh. And while both teams have good offenses, the defenses have been what's been carrying both of these teams, as both teams carry a top 10 defense in America, and it becomes quickly apparent that those defenses are going to be placed on full display. This quickly turns into one of the more low-scoring games that we have witnessed thus far this season. And just for both teams, neither team was really able to find any sort of rhythm offensively. Both teams were having a very hard time, as it's only 7-6 going to the last 30 seconds of this first half. Army is able to get another interception as well. So you would think with all these turnovers that Army's been able to force, they would be able to take advantage. Well, even though Army hasn't turned the ball over as much, they have not been much better, as Pittsburgh recovers a fumble. Linebacker could not remain in bounds. Could have been a scoop and score, but it does go to show that defense, even though defense can be a lost art sometimes, you gotta be able to enjoy the little things. Gotta be able to enjoy those defensive battles every once in a while. We actually don't see a score in gameplay until like 30 seconds left in the game. It just goes to show how competitive both of these defenses were. But Army can get into the end zone here. It's a 3-point game, which they can't even convert. It still doesn't change the fact, though, that they have to go and get this onside kick. The onside kick is going to be the biggest difference between Army winning and losing, and Pittsburgh does recover that onside kick. They tried to, scoop it out of his hands, but Chris Malcolm was hanging on for dear life, and what was the offensive struggle? Pittsburgh able to win a critical game. So I say that Navy is the likely candidate to meet up with probably Pitt at this point, because Navy is the only undefeated team left in their part of the Conference USA. They're going to be 5-0 in conference play now with this 28-10 win over the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. As for USC, they're going to continue their bounce back as they're able to take down West Virginia in a nationally televised game 45-21.
Colorado State also makes it known that they should have been a top 25 team for quite some time, taking on an above average Utah team and winning by 10 total points. Meanwhile, the Ohio State Buckeyes roll through the regular season as they take on another in-state opponent in the Buckeye division. Ohio State dominates once again, though, winning 63-17. But there also was a fair share of close calls, Miami being one of them. Miami nearly loses to Florida Atlantic, but a touchdown pass from Vaden with less than 5 minutes left to play was what turned out to be not only the go-ahead score, but the game-winning touchdown as well. Miami narrowly hangs on and wins by one singular point. LSU continues the downfall of Alabama as LSU is able to beat Alabama 38-14. The Crimson Tide are now 3-6, and that means one more loss will remove them from bowl eligibility. Keeping it in the Southeast, Georgia was taking on Vanderbilt on the road, and Vanderbilt almost pulled off a shocker of their own. However, Georgia went in and scored 13 unanswered points in the final frame in order to just narrowly avoid losing an embarrassing one. With that being said, Florida State also hosted an in-state opponent in the UCF Knights, and Florida State did not have the same drama. They blow out UCF to get to 5-0 in SEC play. So there was no new teams when we got into week number 12 entering or exiting the top 25. So we'll take a quick look around to see any potential clinching situations as we get into the last few weeks of the season. So Clemson and Virginia Tech, they're tied for first place in the Carolinas division. They're going to play each other here, not in week 12, but in that week 13-14 time frame. As for the Commonwealth on the other side, it looks like it's Virginia's division to lose. If they win at least 2 of their next 3 games, they will win. Even if they beat just North Carolina, they should be good to go because they have the tiebreaker on Duke and Eastern Carolina as well. Shout out to the Cavaliers for also being ranked. Meanwhile, over in the Frontier Division, things got interesting after Minnesota suffered its second loss in conference play, so it's turning into a 3-team race. There's a real chance that all 3 teams can tie for first. Going to be an interesting deal breaker. However, in the Lake Division, Iowa is listed at the very top right now. But Bowling Green beat Iowa most recently. That's why Iowa is no longer undefeated. So if the Falcons can win out, they can go to the American Conference Championship game. That being said, in the Alamo, it looks like it's going to be a 3-team race between Texas, Baylor, and Houston. Houston will play Texas here coming very shortly, but a lot to sort out here in the Alamo division. And the same can also be said for the Lone Star, which is a freeway race between SMU, TCU, and the Oklahoma Sooners as well. Meanwhile, in the Buckeye division, it's starting to become very clear who has things under control. Now, Ohio State, if they win their next game, they will clinch a trip to the Big Ten Championship once again. In the Hoosier division, however, it's not as set in stone. Michigan does have the win over Miami of Ohio. They just have to win one of their next 2 games. They'll also be in that Big Ten Championship as well. Meanwhile, in the Colonial Division, it's very likely that Navy is going to represent for the Conference USA. Navy at this point, there is 3 conference games left. They do also have the tiebreaker over Rutgers, so if they win one more game, they'll clinch a trip to the Conference USA Championship. For Pitt, Pitt controls its own destiny as well with 3 conference games left to go. As long as they win at least 2 of their next 3, they're going to be guaranteed to go as well. Meanwhile, in the MAC, it looked like Louisville is a lock to get in to the MAC championship at this point. 8 conference games in the MAC, and they have the tiebreaker on Vanderbilt because Vanderbilt did lose to Louisville. So Cardinals are having an excellent season, just coming out of left field, and they're going to represent the Blues division. However, for the Great Lakes, there's more of a race going on here. Northern Illinois is in the lead for right now, but they still got to play West Virginia. So still a lot to sort out here on this side of the MAC. Meanwhile, going over to the Mountain West, Arizona currently is on top with a 4-1 overall record. They still have to play Arizona State towards the end of the season. Arizona State, the only team in shouting distance here in the desert, because it seems like it is the weaker side of the Mountain West this year. But in the Mountain, looks like things are looking good for Colorado State. The Colorado State Rams are undefeated. They still have to play Boise State, who has only one loss, but the Rams do control their own destiny. For the Pac-12, the Northwest is actually a little bit of a dumpster fire, but Nevada is on top of it right now. They only have one more game left to play. They do have to play Cal. So the winner of the Nevada and Cal game is very likely going to play in the Pac-12 championship. But in the Pacific, things get more interesting. So Hawaii beats USC. So if USC loses another game, San Diego State could move ahead. Hawaii could possibly sneak in there as well. They do also play San Diego State too. So Hawaii, even though it looked like they were dead on arrival in the first half of the year, they could still sneak into the Pac-12 championship as well. Finally, for the Southern Conferences, got the SEC. Georgia does have the edge on Coastal Carolina, as they beat them back in week number 1. Georgia, if they can beat Georgia Tech, they should be good here. And then we have a new team on top right now. That is Florida State. They have beaten Miami. They still got to play Florida at the end of the season. But if Florida State wins both of those games, that Florida State-Florida game, at least for conference championship implications, won't even matter. And finally, in the Sun Belt, looks like the LSU Tigers are on top once again. They got a 6-1 record. If they win one of their next 2 games in conference play, they will likely not only win the Bayou, but likely host the Sun Belt Championship. And over in the Dixie, yes, Ole Miss is on top, but Troy has the tiebreaker because they did beat Ole Miss. As long as Troy is at least tied or ahead of Ole Miss, Troy will be the ones going to the Sun Belt Championship and representing for the Dixie. So we'll get week number 12 action started here, and we begin with some notable teams playing in the early portions of those Saturday week 12 games. Ohio State is now going to get to that double-digit win threshold as they destroy the Cincinnati Bearcats at Nippert Stadium 35-6. It was never a contest. As for the Miami Hurricanes, they'll end up winning 45-16, and so that does mean the Miami Hurricanes cement themselves as one of the possible at-large teams for the college football playoff. Meanwhile, Florida State is now going to be just one game away from going to the SEC Championship, and that is courtesy of a 52-16 win over USF. As for the Army Black Knights, they will be able to bounce back from a disappointing loss to Pittsburgh on the road. They return back home and dominate Penn State 38-7. So Houston was on a roll, but after losing their first game of the season, they now stumble into their toughest game of the year, the new #1 team in the nation, the Texas Longhorns. And it's always impressive when a team can score 50 points in, one game or even a span of 2 or 3 games, but we're 9 games into the season, at least Texas currently is, and they have averaged 50 points a game. That is clearly the tops in America, so if Houston is going to find a way to win this game, they're probably going to have to do it in a shootout, because it doesn't matter how you slice it up, it doesn't matter how good your defense is, Texas is going to score their points. That is what we do certainly know. And so far, Houston has not understood the assignment, because Houston finds itself down 14-0 already, and it just goes to show how quickly things can go wrong when you're playing a team like Texas, right? You got to play at a high level, and Houston has not done that. They have not learned from their mistakes from their previous loss, but with 8:23 left to play, they will at least find the scoreboard. Trey Gibson's able to find the end zone for the Houston Cougars. Question is, can they get some stops? And in the second quarter, Houston was holding its own. They have not given up a single point
against this Texas Longhorns team in the second quarter. That should be a miracle in its own right. But with less than 2 minutes left to play in the first half, got this tight end who's going to rumble and stumble his way to about the 5-yard line, where Jason Adams is going to be looking for his first touchdown of the day. Very next play in a goal line situation, looking over the middle. He's going to dump it off to Donnie Clark again, who forces his way through. Touchdown, Texas! And the Longhorns are going to take a 21-7 lead. And after a 3-and-out for the Houston Cougars, Texas could potentially triple dip here. They get the ball to start the second half, and they will. Texas scores yet again. And then midway through the third quarter, Jason Adams, looking for that 28-point lead, might get it here pretty soon, with Donnie Clark making another critical red zone catch. He has been particularly unguardable in the red zone, and it's easy when you have other guys like Pierre Cohen able to quickly get open, so that whenever Houston sends a blitz, it gets neglected quickly. That's how you beat them blitzes, boys and girls. You get those quick passes, and Houston had a clinic put on them as they lose to Texas 55-7. Meanwhile, Kentucky was also able to save its season as they beat Vanderbilt. They still got to win their next two, though.
Now, right behind the Texas Longhorns is the Clemson Tigers, who are ranked number 2 in the country, and Clemson is also able to win and remain undefeated. However, they were on the road against Wake Forest and were not nearly as dominant as what we just saw from Texas. However, there was a few games that we did see simulated that are going to change some things up in these conference championship races. For example, Minnesota loses to Iowa State 30-21, and so what that essentially means is that Missouri and Nebraska game that's going to happen next week is going to ultimately decide who goes to the American Conference Championship. As for Virginia, they were in a position to clinch a trip to the ACC against either Virginia Tech or Clemson, but North Carolina wins 35-21. It keeps the Tar Heels' hopes alive for right now, but they'll need Virginia to drop another game here in one of their 2 last games of the season. However, Georgia is able to blow out Auburn 66-24 in what was a slugfest for the Auburn Tigers. They were really not competitive in this game as they get back to 500. And USC nearly drops its second game of the season. They were very close to losing to Stanford. Stanford almost pulling off a signature upset on the way to go ahead and take down this highly regarded USC team to get the bowl eligibility, but USC was able to find that last gear, win the fourth quarter, and ultimately win the game. But even with what we just witnessed, we have a new number 1 team in the nation. Clemson is able to surpass Texas, and I disagree with this. I don't know how you could see Texas go and beat a ranked Houston team, still ranked by the way. They looked better than Clemson, and yet Clemson is your number 1 team in the nation right now. I simply do not get it. Oh, Texas fans have an absolute right to feel some type of way that from what just transpired right in front of our eyes right now. That is absolutely wild to me that we actually do get to witness to that. Beyond that, though, a lot of your top teams are going to remain the same. Now, we do have a little bit of movement towards the bottom. Clemson does move up a couple of spots. They beat Louisiana. Florida's up 2. They were on bye. Colorado State up 3 spots. They blow out Utah State. Houston is down 2 spots to 23. And then we got 2 new teams in the top 25. Wisconsin is back in, but they're done with their regular season. They are an 8-4 team, so they kind of backdoor their way into that top 25. And then Arizona, another Mountain West team, now gets in at number 25 in the nation. They just blew out Air Force. So with that said, let's go ahead and kick off week number 13 of the NCSL season, with Michigan going to Kinnick Stadium to take on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, this could have been a top 5 matchup, but Iowa did recently drop their first game of the season,
and Iowa is looking to avoid losing 2 games in a row before possibly going into that American Conference Championship game. And sure enough, Iowa coming with a sheer fire and with a sheer determination as well to come out on top, as both teams going neck and neck throughout the 4th quarter, as both teams desperately want to win. This is the type of game that both teams really do not want to lose, especially Michigan, who has been perfect this entire season so far. They don't want to drop their first game now, as Michigan will take the lead, or at least make that lead bigger. They choose not to go for the 2-point conversion. So, with 2:12 left to play in the game, Michigan has a chance to clutch things up for the Wolverines. They decide to pass it, which is risky, but the gamble is going to ultimately pay off, though, because they pick up the first down. Granted, because they got out of bounds, they stopped the clock, and they decided to pass again. Oh, man, that was a dangerous throw, too. Is Michigan trying to give up this game? I mean, like, it's working, don't get me wrong, but, man, these are just some dangerous throws being made. Hopefully, they keep it a little bit more conservative, keep it on the ground so that they can win this game more comfortably, but they're still deciding to get out of bounds, so, like, it's almost like they don't want to end this game. They're risking injury. Hopefully, it doesn't hurt them in the end, and thankfully, it does not. Junior Blaylock able to find the end zone with 1:20 left to play, but it leaves a sliver open for Iowa. Just a sliver of a chance, but they gotta score quickly, and thankfully they do. Sean Vaney does find the end zone. Critical decision time. Do they go for it, or do they settle for the extra point? And they're gonna go for this 2-point conversion now. We'll see if they can turn this into a 7-point game, and they will. They do. Aaron Jordan does make the catch. It's a 1-score game, but they got to get the onside kick, though. If they don't get the onside kick, it's going to be over. And sure enough, it was a decent kick, but it was recovered off the bounce by TJ Graham. Michigan is going to remain undefeated on the season, and they do so by beating Iowa, handing them their 2nd straight loss. However, one of the biggest games that we also have going on at the same time as that Michigan and Iowa game is Virginia Tech and Clemson. These 2 teams are in the exact same division in the ACC, and just like how last year this game decided who goes to the ACC championship, same deal here. Whoever wins this game is going to clinch a trip to the ACC title game, where who they will go up against is unsure, but not only will they go to the ACC championship, but winner of this game will also host the ACC championship, as all conference championship games are at the home stadium of the better conference record, as Jonathan Alvarez is going to set a new school record for most passing yards in a career. He is the first quarterback at Virginia Tech to have 10,000 passing yards. He hits 5 digits for the first time in Hokie history. Can that be converted into a victory, though? As Jonathan Alvarez is going to drop back. He wants to throw over to right-hand side and finds John Oliver in the end zone. Touchdown, Hokies! And Jonathan Alvarez also expanding a school record for most passing touchdowns in a career. That's his 87th that he has thrown in a Hokies uniform. And that will indeed take us into halftime. All knotted up at 14, as we are possibly just 1/2 away from settling who's going to the ACC title game. Hokies look to take the lead for the first time today, and they will with John Oliver. Another touchdown for the Hokies, and it's another school record, this time in an individual season. Alvarez with his 34th passing touchdown of his career. And that does mean that he is going to be the greatest quarterback in Virginia Tech history. Dare I say it? Better than Michael Vick, at least from a production standpoint. Whether that's actually true or not, that's up for you guys to decide in the comments section down below. But 3rd and short coming up for Jordan Alvarez and company, as he's going to throw short to John Oliver once again. He really enjoys that receiver. As Jonathan Alvarez, he's been very efficient today. Only 20 pass attempts, but he's turned that into 4 touchdowns today. Really is not messing around and finding out. Clemson will now desperately need a surge if they want to get back in this thing. Touchdown on this particular drive would go an extremely long way. 2nd and 5 now coming up as Thompson lines up under center. He's going to fake the handoff. He's going to keep it himself. And Charles Ernst finds the end zone. Touchdown, Clemson. And the Tigers are back down to just 1 possession. However, Virginia Tech, a couple of minutes later, drive down the length of the field themselves, and they will quickly score with Martin Davis. He's going to make it 35-21. And then also with 2.5 minutes left to play, Charles Ernst is going to be able to keep it himself, and Charles Ernst will pick up 5 yards on the particular run as well. So, 35-21 is your score as Ernst wants to throw over the middle and finds his receiver. Touchdown, Clemson. The Tigers are back in it. Can Death Valley roar them back? 90 seconds to go. Ernst with a chance to tie, and it's intercepted. It is picked off, and it just might be barbecue chicken. Virginia Tech's gonna win, and they will be going to the ACC title game. Meanwhile, we have some studio updates that did unfold right before our eyes, and oh Lord, Ole Miss is down. They have been down by Southern Miss, who was simply playing for nothing more than pride. This is a shocker. This is an insane, shocking moment as Ole Miss drops their 2nd game in the season, and that means Troy, because this is also a Sun Belt Conference game, Troy's going to go to the Sun Belt Championship. That is incredible. No one expected Troy to be in the Sun Belt Championship. Maybe a dark horse, but, they actually made it happen. Plus, Florida State loses too. They lose to Florida Atlantic 35-30. And that really hurts FSU's chances. They controlled their own destiny, and now it looks like Miami is on the forefront to go to the SEC title game.
So seeing that Ole Miss did lose to Southern Miss of all teams, it opens the door for Troy to clinch a lot sooner, and they take advantage. Troy beats Alabama convincingly, and the Troy Trojans are going to the Sun Belt Championship game. Meanwhile, the Ohio State Buckeyes will also confirm their trip to the Big Ten Championship as well, as they were able to take down Akron 30-14. The Zips dropped their 8th game in the season. Speaking of those title games though, Nebraska, with the recent shortfalls of Minnesota, Nebraska can clinch its way into the American title game. All they would need is a win over this 19th ranked Missouri squad. Missouri also trying to make its way happen. Missouri wins, they're in as well. So, a trip to the American title game on the line, and Travis Wiggins wants to make it known that Missouri cannot compete with this team when it's focused, when it's locked in, and certainly both those things are absolutely true right now. Nebraska giving the Missouri Tigers nothing short of the business here in this battle of the Border War special. But this border war is turning one-sided very quickly. Missouri down 24-0 with 1 quarter left to play. I'm sure at this point the Tigers would just be okay with finding the scoreboard, and they will with Rick Walker. However, they're going to go for the 2-point conversion, and the 2-point conversion is also successful as well. So, 2-point conversion is good. Nebraska is able to go down the field but get a field goal, and Missouri's offense is finally starting to wake up. Is it probably too late? Yeah, it probably is absolutely too late. They needed this a long time ago. But
appreciate Missouri Tigers' competitive fire, but even though Nebraska had a slow day offensively, they still win pretty comfortably here, and George Gentry, one of your custom coaches, is going to the American title game.
But now we'll wrap up some of the more notable games that happened over the course of week number 13. LSU, for example, they continue their run for the Sun Belt as they take down the Ragin' Cajuns 51-27, and Louisiana will effectively be kicked out of bowl eligibility. As for the Miami Hurricanes, they're going to be able to take down USF 35-7. That means the Southern Florida Bulls are going to miss a bowl game, so they will not have bowl eligibility for 2 consecutive years like they were hoping for. Georgia, they're able to take down their little brothers in Georgia Southern 49-14, as Georgia is now 1 win away from being a double-digit win team in the regular season once again. And of course, Texas is able to take down Rice 42-23. So that does mean that Texas is 1 win away at the very least from winning a trip to the Big 12 championship. But you see, what we end up witnessing was actually a little bit of a seismic change in the polls, right? Just an absolute volcanic eruption happening in week 13. I mean, a lot of movement here. Miami and LSU are up a couple of spots. Clemson moved down 5. Those are things that we definitely saw coming. Nebraska moves up a couple of spots as well after they beat Missouri. Troy is now a top 10 team in the country. They just need 1 more win and they will be they're good. So Troy's in the Sun Belt Championship. Virginia Tech is going to be in the ACC Championship. It's just a matter of who's coming out on that other side. Couple of teams moving up a couple of spots. Navy and Pittsburgh. Iowa only moving down a couple of spots to number 14 in the country. Georgia's up 3. Ole Miss down 11. Colorado State up 5. They're now number 17 team in the nation. Baylor gets into the top 25. They do this by blowing out Houston. So they have a date with Texas to decide who goes to the Big 12 championship. Wisconsin has been chilling by themselves, and they're somehow number 19. And then rounding out your group, Florida State at 21. Duke is in for the first time at 22. Virginia back in at number 23. North Carolina at 24, and then Nevada Wolfpack sneak in as the number 25 team in the nation. And a lot of what happened is that we actually had 5 teams that were in the polls that did end up falling out. Army, they lose to Buffalo, and that keeps Buffalo Bowl hopes alive. Memphis loses a heartbreaker to Arkansas State in overtime. Florida, they lose to UCF. And of course, Arizona, who barely snuck in at number 25, well, their stay was not very long because, well, they end up losing to New Mexico. So Arizona is no longer even receiving any votes at the moment. So that now takes us into the final week of the regular season, and that's when we do see some rivalry games typically happen around this time. So Ole Miss is going to be able to beat Mississippi State in an absolute barn fire. The Bulldogs of Mississippi State needed this win desperately, but they aren't going to get it here, so Ole Miss will win their 10th game of the season. But in a huge twist of events, Georgia Tech is actually going to be able to take down their big bad brother in Georgia 47-28. And you see those conference records, they're both in the SEC. So Georgia Tech is going to sneak in and play in the SEC championship after all. What a massive surprise that we just got to witness. With that said though, Virginia Tech has already clinched a berth into the ACC championship. They already have the edge against Clemson. However, if Virginia can win this Commonwealth Cup special, they can work their way into the ACC championship and possibly play Virginia Tech again, just in Blacksburg, Virginia, not in our home stadium. So, interesting to see how this plays out, knowing that there is a good chance that these two teams will have to play again in the very next week. That could always be a challenging proposition,
And so far, Virginia is playing pretty hard because they do not want to hold their fate in someone else's hands. And I wholeheartedly get that. I wholeheartedly understand that. Virginia Tech, meanwhile, looking to time this game up as Alvarez is forced to scramble, but still finds a way to connect with one of his receivers. We now have a tie ball game on our hands here on Virginia's campus. However, late in the first half, though, Virginia with a chance to take the lead, and Adam Hampton almost dives into the end zone, but they will mark him just short. They will mark him at just about the 1 yard line. So, that being said, Virginia is able to take advantage. They will take the lead, and it will be taken in halftime as well. 21-14 is your score as Virginia is 1 half away from going to the ACC title game. But Virginia Tech is trying to knock their hated rivals out of that hunt. Alvarez looking to take the lead in the closing moments of the third quarter. And they will. They will do precisely that. And now Virginia Tech has a chance to close things out. Looking to run to the outside. He's got the outside leverage. And Martin Davis is going to march his way into the end zone. Touchdown, Hokies. And Virginia Tech takes a 35-21 lead. And how about a little bit of icing on the cake? This throw for Alvarez gets him closer to 100 career passing touchdowns in his career as Virginia Tech wins the Commonwealth Cup 42-28. Meanwhile, the only thing standing in between Texas and another appearance into the Big 12 championship game is the 18th ranked Baylor Bears, who also happen to be undefeated in Big 12 conference play themselves. So, winner of this game is going to the Big 12 title game. And I would say that Baylor is at least the second best team in the Big 12. So maybe this is more of a de facto Big 12 championship game unfolding right before our eyes. And then whatever happens in conference championship weekend might be a little bit more of a formality per se. But Texas is going to score first. No surprises here so far, as Texas does end up scoring on the opening drive. And then they get another red zone opportunity here with a few more minutes passing by, as Donnie Clark trying to pick up some more yards through the air, but he does get stuffed after a 5-yard gain. Very next play, though, Adams again drops it off to the tailback, who's able to get outside leverage. Is able to get out of bounds inside the 5-yard line. Jason Adams not pushing the ball too terribly deep downfield, but, just not making sure the ball's not being placed in harm's way either. He knows his roster that he has, the team around him, is so much better than the team that Baylor has on the other side. So, as long as Texas doesn't make the silly mistakes, they're going to be fine. They are going to be more than okay. So, that being said, another goal line opportunity. Carl Magnum comes in, gets a nice little running play into the end zone, and Texas seems like it was going to run away with it, but then they hit a little bit of a cold spot here, and now Baylor, if they can sneak a couple of scores in, they could be right back in it after all. So, 3rd and goal coming up. They need a touchdown in the worst way, and they are going to get it from their quarterback. A touchdown for Baylor, but they're also going to go for 2, trying to cut it down to 10, trying to scramble one more time, but it's no good. And now it's 21-9. They have to give the ball back to Texas. Feel like there's too much time on the clock to try and force an onside kick, which, as we've seen throughout this episode, does have a very low chance of success. They give the ball back. Texas comes down and scores, and it was barbecue chicken after that. Texas going to the Big 12 championship, and then Northwestern finishing the year on a high note as well, as they narrowly beat Illinois. But while we're waiting for that famed game,
getting ready to kick off. We do get some more rivalry game updates in the final week of the regular season. USC is going to take down UCLA in a crosstown rivalry 48-19, and that does mean that USC is good enough to qualify for the Pac-12 championship, and they should be hosting once again. As for LSU, they will likely host the Sun Belt Championship game as well as they polish off the regular season with a 42-20 victory over the Arkansas Razorbacks, who still are good enough to go bowl eligible. And an interesting twist of fate here, Florida State is going to lose their second SEC game 37-21, and Miami, you would remember Florida State beat Miami, but because Miami was able to win out afterwards, we're going to see the Miami Hurricanes in the SEC Championship against Georgia Tech, not this Florida State team after all. What's also interesting, though, is that this Ohio State and Michigan game, we're going to see this again in Big Ten Championship weekend, but the winner of this game, even though we know what the Big Ten Championship matchup is going to be, this is about where that Big Ten Championship is going to take place. Is it going to remain here in Ann Arbor, or will Ohio State be able to stay home for the Big Ten Championship game? So a lot of implications around conference title games here, even though both teams are in, because, hey, who doesn't like a little bit of home field advantage? And you can tell right away that these teams are very closely ranked to each other in the top 25, and it also is playing out like that on the field as well. Two very evenly matched teams getting at it right now. They are getting busy with it, and at the half, it's still a tie ball game. However, less than 30 seconds left to go in the third quarter. It seems like Michigan is getting ready to maybe pull away, maybe get ready to take control of this particular ball game. But with that being said, Ohio State is simply not going away. They're going to hand it off once again to Chad London. He gets it inside the 15-yard line. Very important drive for the Ohio State Buckeyes. What are they made of from a toughness standpoint? Hicks fires to the left-hand side, and he finds an open man. Touchdown, Ohio State. And with Michigan not being able to answer back, they could win it here on what could be the final offensive drive for the Ohio State Buckeyes, not only in this game, but also in the regular season as well. Hicks is going to drop back a couple of plays later. He wants to lead, and he gets it! Micah Peterson is open in the back of the end zone. Touchdown, Ohio State! And the Buckeyes will win, and Ohio State will host that Big Ten Championship game after all. But we have one more battle of Tobacco Road coming your way. Number 22 Duke, led by PJ McNair, is going to head over and take on the North Carolina Tar Heels in this battle with Tobacco Road. North Carolina also recently getting into the top 25 as well. The ACC getting more respect as the season has progressed, so you do love to see that. Big game here for North Carolina. Duke cannot go to the ACC championship because even if they win, they would be tied in their division along with Virginia, and Virginia did beat Duke earlier this year. But North Carolina needs this win because North Carolina did beat Virginia earlier this year. So, North Carolina wins. They're going to the ACC championship to take on Virginia Tech. And they are certainly rooting for North Carolina to beat Duke because I'm sure Virginia Tech does not want to play their same hated rival 2 weeks in a row, even with knowing that there is an auto bid on the line. So, they're pulling for North Carolina, and so far North Carolina putting together a little bit of a drive, and the Tar Heels will score, and they will make this a touchdown game with 1 minute left to go here in this first half of action. However, Duke still has a minute left on the clock. They have all of their timeouts, and they're looking to go right back to work as their man breaks a tackle
And already the Duke Blue Devils, they are indeed in North Carolina territory. Joseph Pierre has struggled through this game, but the backup quarterback in York Custom has handled this drive well so far. He gets his guys to the line. He's going to run it with the tailback, though. Not a ton of trust in the backup quarterback, knowing that, hey, we have a pretty solid kicker. Let's at least make sure we get a field goal. But Joseph Pierre is feeling a little bit more aggressive in that. He's going to continue to push this ball downfield, and Ryan Robinson does get the Duke Blue Devils in the red zone, where a couple of plays later, Joseph Pierre gonna step up in the pocket, throws over his body, and finds Markeith Williams in the end zone. Touchdown Duke. We got a tie game at half. So 14-14 is gonna be your score after all, as North Carolina is getting ready to take itself to work now, as North Carolina is looking to retake the lead. And on a 3rd and goal, they're going to run it over to the right-hand side, where Brad Frank is able to get in untouched. Touchdown, Tar Heels. And the Tar Heels will retake the lead, trying to pull away from Duke. But Duke, even though they may not have the most talented players, certainly one of the lesser talent rosters among any team that has been ranked in the top 25 at any point in the season. Well, this is still a well-coached football team. It's a disciplined team. It's a team that is simply never going to give up. One of the hardest working teams in America, I would imagine. And with less than 4 minutes left to play, Duke has a chance to take the lead with a backup quarterback, and Pierre throws a dot. Not in the end zone, but that was still a hard throw to make. He made it look pretty easy. The arm talent is certainly there for Joseph Pierre, especially when he starts learning more of that playbook. Pierre is going to be a very high-quality starting quarterback for years to come, potentially. He's just a freshman, and you saw the presence right there, waiting for Kellen Brown to get open, and it allows Duke to set up a game-winning field goal attempt, which is up. It is good! Duke is going to stun North Carolina at the buzzer, and Duke is going to win 31-30 being your final score. But while all that was unfolding, we had another studio update. Troy loses 27-19, so Troy's at-large bid, those at-large chances are now completely out of the window. They must win next week. But before I go ahead and show these conference championship matchups, there was a few other games of note that I wanted to talk about. Missouri, they had an outside chance of making the college football playoff as a potential at-large, but this big loss by Texas A&M is going to crush that. I would be surprised if Missouri is still in the top 25 at this point. However, one team that I expect to get a bid into the college football playoff is the Clemson Tigers. They're not going to be in this ACC championship game, but Clemson, as a borderline top 5 team, should be in anyways because of the fact that they are ranked number 6 in the country. And of course, the Navy midshipmen getting the world to pay attention to them back in year number 4. They cap off an even better season number 5 regular season with a 52-34 win over Maryland. The Terrapins, in spite of being able to pull off multiple top 25 wins this year, they're not even going to be good enough to make it to a bowl game. Just a team that was just probably the most frustrating to watch here in year number 5. Alright, so we've made it to conference championship weekend officially, and this is what your conference championship games are going to look like around the country. Now, this is where 10 to 14 bids are going to come from because of how the current playoff system is set up. Each conference does get an automatic bid, so that's how you get 10 of 14 coming out of conference championship weekend. Northern Illinois, even though they took a step back this season, still made it to the conference championship game in the MAC, but Louisville will be hosting this year after they surprised a ton of people in the southern part of that MAC conference. We also get an alliteration of the Red River rivalry between Oklahoma and Texas. Texas is your number 1 team in the country.
in your first top 25 matchup, and there's multiple top 25 matchups obviously in conference championship weekend. Number 18 Troy, they did lose their previous game, and now they got to go into playing LSU. Not an easy challenge, but Troy has a chance to make a college football playoff appearance happen though. Meanwhile, for Conference USA, Navy, they won the championship last year. They're hosting Pittsburgh for the right to go. This might be a one-bid league. Speaking of one-bid leagues, we might have one here in the American as well, as Nebraska is going to make the field trip to Kinnick Stadium to take on the Iowa Hawkeyes. As for the SEC Championship, Georgia Tech, who now improves to number 21 in the nation, well, they now get to go and play against the Miami Hurricanes here for that 3:30 slate. At the 4 o'clock slate is the Mountain West Championship. Colorado State having an excellent season. They'll need to beat Arizona State, though, to be in because they're outside of that top 14. Virginia and Virginia Tech will have a rematch again in the ACC, as Duke did thwart North Carolina's chances, even though Virginia did lose just this previous game. And then rounding out your weekend for conference championship games, you got number 8 USC hosting California for the Pac-12 title. And of course, you have a rematch of the Big 12 championship, Ohio State this time around getting to host the Michigan Wolverines. So let's go ahead and take that deep dive into conference championship weekend, and it starts with that Sun Belt title game between Troy and LSU. Now, Troy did have the chance to host LSU at their home stadium because of how well Troy has been this season, but because South Alabama did play spoiler in that Battle of the Belt rivalry game, instead this game is taking place at one of the most hostile environments in all of college football. So, Troy certainly does have a tall task on its hand, trying to beat LSU in their stadium for that Sun Belt automatic berth. And so far, Troy is showing why we didn't initially have the Troy Trojans winning the Sun Belt or even making it to the Sun Belt Championship. But not too long after that, Greg Jenkins is going to make me shut up, because Greg Jenkins is going to score here. Finally get the Troy Trojans on the board, and then with a 2-point conversion that they also wanted to convert, they get the 2-point conversion as well. So incredibly slow start for LSU, don't get me wrong, but that being said, Troy is slowly starting to claw its way back, and now we could be looking at Troy only being down by 7 points. Watch out, fellas. So 9-point game. They're going for the 2-point conversion as well, as Jenkins wants to scramble but is contained in the pocket. So this time around, the 2-point conversion is unsuccessful. However, later in the fourth quarter, Jenkins does get another red zone opportunity and takes advantage yet again. Troy is going to score once more, but even with this late surge, it still doesn't change the fact that Troy has got to score here in order to take the lead. Jenkins looking to fire downfield, but it's intercepted. It's going to be picked off at about the 20-yard line. All they needed was a field goal, and Greg Jenkins folds under the pressure. With a Sun Belt automatic berth on the line, LSU defense is able to make a stand, and so we see LSU get the very first automatic berth into the college football playoff in this new 14-team format. Now, with that said, we now quickly head on over to the Conference USA title game, which is held in at the Naval Academy up in Annapolis, Maryland. And quickly, what you can see between what's happening down south and what's happening up north, a little bit different, I would say. And we are also witnessing, well,
It's just a little bit on that colder side, nothing too crazy. Navy is used to this though. They won the Conference USA Championship game last season, and it did end up sparking that Cinderella run into the college football playoff semifinals last year. Pittsburgh, not so much. Pittsburgh is not used to this. I believe this is the first time that we've actually have seen Pitt be in this conference championship kind of scenario this season, like in this entire series. And they're playing like it, to be honest with you, because they're not playing as sure-handed. They're not as confident in, where they need to be on assignments. Navy knows what they're doing, and it shows on this final drive, able to punch it into the end zone yet again. And so Navy takes a 21-0 lead at the half. And it also turns to a spot where, hey, we might see Navy run away with this. And they actually do. Navy is going to score again with Kurt Barrett. Really not much else to write home about after this, because even though Pittsburgh does score, Navy is also going to... No, they don't do the same thing. Hold up. I might be wrong here. Pittsburgh might be up to something. Are they trying to cook right now? Never mind. Pittsburgh could not score again. So Navy was able to win the Conference USA Championship, even though they did lose the turnover battle pretty convincingly. We'll see Navy in the playoff once again. That being said, now, though, George Gentry and his explosive offense, that's number 2 in the country, has a chance to come out and get into the college football playoff themselves. They gotta handle business against Iowa, and so far, seems like Iowa is handling them, already up to a 13-0 lead, before Nebraska even so much as gets even a remote red zone opportunity. Thankfully, they do take advantage of that red zone opportunity, and if there was anybody that could be able to make a multi-touchdown comeback look pretty easy, it's certainly this Nebraska football team, because, man, they got some explosive players all over the field. Jonathan Wiley being one of them. He's going to be able to score on a crosser, and it actually does give Nebraska their very first lead of the day. As now, with 1 minute left, Iowa forced to punt the ball away once more, and Nebraska wants to score again. Looking over to the right-hand side, finds Travis Wiggins once again, who has been a good red zone target for the Cornhuskers. We'll see if they go to him again in this goal line situation, but instead they pitch the ball out on a speed option, and Pierre Nelson forces his way into the end zone. Touchdown, Cornhuskers! And now the Cornhuskers is howling hard at this point. I'll tell you what, because I thought Iowa was really going to make Nebraska work for it. I truly did. But after that 13-0 spat, Nebraska is of course going to respond with 35 unanswered points, and they could make this 42 unanswered points as well. But in a goal line situation, Cornelius Reed did try to throw the ball. He did not throw it away, so Jerome Thomas on the other end was able to get to him. So now it's a 2nd and goal from farther out, and Iowa steals the pitch. Pierre Nelson is giving chase, but he's the last line of defense. Pierre Nelson is able to bring him down, but it sets up Iowa with its own red zone opportunity. Thought we were going to see the backups get into the game, but Drew Robinson and company, well, they certainly have other plans all of a sudden. That's a touchdown for the Cornhuskers, and now they're going for 2. This would make it a 14-point game if they're able to convert, and sure enough, they will make it happen. Nathan Anderson is going to be able to score there, and then Iowa gets another shot at the red zone, trying to make something shake, but wait a minute now, it's intercepted. Nebraska looking to go to distance, trying to put the exclamation point here on this American Conference Championship game, and they will. Lee takes it all the way, and Nebraska is going to be able to win the American Conference title. 42-21 ends up being your final score,
and the Nebraska Cornhuskers, they're going to be back in this college football playoff. First time since season 3. Meanwhile, the SEC Championship is getting ready to go, and a little bit of night game action here as Georgia Tech is going to make the trip up, actually down to Miami. This Hurricanes team getting in, frankly, because, they got a little bit on that lucky side. Yes, they had one loss, but if Florida State would have been the teams that they should have taken care of after we did see Florida State beat Miami earlier this season, we would have been seeing Florida State in this title game, hosting this SEC title game nonetheless. But instead, we're watching Miami back at it because, Florida State losing to Florida Atlantic did open the door for Miami, and they ran right through it. So, Miami Hurricanes have a chance to win the SEC title game for the first time since season number 3, because you would remember back in year 4, the Georgia Bulldogs were able to win the SEC title game. But turns out that we have a really quick game on our, not quick game, but it's going to be a competitive game on our hands. Thought Miami was going to be able to roll over Georgia Tech, because while Georgia Tech is a nice story, Georgia Tech is not the same level of team that, a Georgia would have been, and Miami, a Florida State. So the fact that Georgia Tech is here with an 8-4 record, we got to admit it to ourselves. It is a little bit of a miracle, I'm not going to lie to you. And Trevor Veeden, he's going to give Miami the lead right before we do go into the halftime locker room. But we flash forward over to the fourth quarter, and surprisingly enough, Georgia Tech is still in it. And that was a dot to that front corner of the end zone thrown by Ahmad Morse. It eventually forces us to go into overtime. So we'll see what happens in the overtime period, but the ball is placed on the ground. It's placed on the ground, and now all Georgia Tech's got to do is score. If they score any points in their next offensive possession, Georgia Tech is going to the college football playoff for the first time this series, and Ahmad Morse is going to get them just 5 yards away from doing just that. And a couple of plays later, 3rd and goal, Ahmad Morse hops over a defender, and he's in! Touchdown, Georgia Tech! They're going to shock the world, they're going to shock the conference, and shoot, maybe they shock themselves at times. Georgia Tech just made it into the top 25 at the end of the regular season. They go to Hard Rock Stadium, and they stun the Miami Hurricanes. Georgia Tech will be in the college football playoff. Miami will have to await its own fate. With that being said, we will have another reiteration of the Commonwealth Cup as Virginia once again is going to have to take on Virginia Tech. Now, we recently saw Virginia Tech handle its business against Virginia, but because Duke beat North Carolina, Virginia was still able to get in spite of that, and they kept Virginia in the top 25, which was a little surprising to me because of how they lost. But maybe there's validity to Virginia being a top 25 team after all, because they're up 16-0 here. It's almost the fourth quarter. Virginia Tech has not scored. I mean, they score there, but oh baby, this is definitely a different type of game than what we experienced at the end of the regular season. And I'm not overly surprised by that, because these two teams are rivals. These two teams absolutely know each other. So I'm not surprised that, what maybe would have worked offensively in the regular season finale game doesn't have that same type of effect here in this conference championship game, especially if those two teams literally just met a week ago. Like, literally a week ago. So Virginia Tech, all credit in the world for, working their way back into this game, but Jonathan Alvarez throws a key interception with 90 seconds left, and Mike Terrell is able to take it all the way back. Virginia might be starting to celebrate on the sidelines, but Jordan Alvarez, with 40 seconds left, wants to get a dime to the end zone. It's going to be intercepted, though. Virginia is going to stun Virginia Tech, and the Cavaliers, who were a bottom feeder just a few years ago, they worked themselves all the way
to the top of the ACC. Virginia takes down Virginia Tech. So that leaves us with one more key conference championship game at this point. It's going to be number 6 Michigan taking on number 2 Ohio State. The Ohio State Buckeyes looking to go to work once again, as Anton Samuel is going to get the scoring started with a touchdown for the Buckeyes. Again, another matchup that we literally just saw in the regular season finale, but because that game was so important, Ohio State is hosting the Big Ten Championship, not Michigan. Not this Michigan Wolverine squad. Could very well see both of these teams in the playoffs regardless of what happens. So Ohio State, of course, playing to try and get themselves one of the 2 byes that is still existing since the transition from a 12-team playoff now to a 14-team playoff. So here we are with 2 minutes left in the first half. Brooks Hicks looks to put an exclamation point on the first half. I just burped that sexy. As now, 2nd and 10 coming up. They're going to run it up the gut for Jonathan Sherman, and that is probably going to be the easiest touchdown that the dude is ever going to have. I mean, I could have ran through that hole, and I have Tom Brady speed at best, right? And y'all already know how slow that man was. I'm not joking to you guys. That was down horrendous stuff. But Junior Blaylock does break the school record for most passing yards in a season. If he has one more forward pass, which he might get here, he does. He gets 4,000 yards with an exclamation point. The 2nd passing touchdown for Junior Blaylock today. And Blaylock becomes the first quarterback in Michigan history to throw for 4,000 yards in a single season. But at the end of the half, Blaylock wanted to try to get a Hail Mary off. He gets stripped instead. And instead of a possible touchdown for the Wolverines, Ohio State is going to take it the complete other way instead. So Ohio State now has a 24-14 lead into the half. We got 30 minutes to decide who is going to win the Big Ten Championship game, one of the last notable conference championship games on the NCSL schedule before that college football playoff bracket gets revealed. So, big time matchup here, looking to try and cement themselves into the playoff. Hicks is going to continue to run forward, and he'll pick up a gain of 7 there. Ohio State has done an excellent job on the ground. They nearly have 200 yards rushing, and it is counting upward as well because Jonathan Sherman almost finds the end zone as well here. He's going to be marked shy at the 1-yard line, and you know what? Sherman did a lot of work there in that red zone opportunity. Gotta award that running back that does all of that work for you, because Jonathan Sherman is also going to score there, and now all the pressure is on this Michigan Wolverine squad getting ready for a 4th and goal. They gotta punch it in. Blaylock, no, it's a handoff to Jeremy Huff. They bamboozle everybody in Columbus with that halfback draw. And now Michigan is right back in it. And after an Ohio State field goal as well, Michigan has a chance to possibly win the game, but it's intercepted. It is going to be picked off with less than 90 seconds left. This game very well might be over. Just trying to run out the rest of his clock. But instead, you know, it's a rival. Because it's a rivalry game, you gotta rub it into their face just a little bit. Ohio State does exactly that. They even go for the 2-point conversion. The audacity of Ohio State. The pettiness of Ohio State. I love it, even though it didn't end up working out. Ohio State is your champions of the Big Ten. They win 40-28, and now Michigan has to await their fate.
As for the other conference championship games that did not feature 2 top 25 teams in the same game, we start with the MAC Championship. The MAC Championship was between Northern Illinois and Louisville. And Louisville, a team that was not expected to be at this point, pulls off an undefeated season in MACtion, and they pull off an overtime victory over Northern Illinois, who won the conference last year. So it'll be the Louisville Cardinals making their first playoff appearance in this series. As for the Texas Longhorns were able to dispatch Oklahoma 40-24. That does mean that Texas finishes the regular season undefeated. In a huge shocker, though, Arizona State was able to take down Colorado State 35-31. Colorado State came in ranked in the top 15, but after this loss, Colorado State falls completely out, and the Arizona State Sun Devils at 7-6 are going to go to the college football playoff because they have the automatic bid from the Mountain West, not Colorado State. As for USC, they are able to handle its business in the Pac-12. Could have been a similar situation. Cal was leading going into the fourth quarter, but 21 unanswered from the USC Trojans propelled this squad that almost won a national championship last year back into the playoff as your Pac-12 champions. So after all of that hard work, after all the sweat and tears put in, we now know what our college football playoff field is going to be. Ohio State and Texas are going to be on bye, so they're moving on to the quarterfinals automatically. As for the other 12 teams in the field, we of course have the four independents, being Miami and Michigan. They're going to play each other here pretty soon. San Diego State also gets in. They're the second team from the Pac-12. And then the highest rated independent team is Clemson. They only have that one loss to Virginia Tech, who did go on and lose to Virginia in the ACC title game. Speaking of the other conference champions, you got Virginia in as a 12 seed. Louisville gets in as the MAC champs. Nebraska, the American champs, will take on Navy. USC will take on Georgia Tech, who won the SEC. And then LSU, your champions of the Sun Belt, will take on Arizona State. Even though they were 7-6, they get the automatic bid for the Mountain West, and they are going to be your 14 seed. Imagine that, your first 7-6 team making it to the college football playoff. Completely wild stuff. But even though a very select few of college football teams in America do get a chance, a real opportunity to play in that college football playoff, that doesn't mean that only 14 teams do get a postseason opportunity. Because for some other teams that maybe don't get to be in this playoff format, but they do have put together a really good season still, bowl season is still a thing, and we actually have some pretty good bowl games that I'm excited to jump into first. So let's check out some of those notable bowl games that happen in this year number 5 postseason. So the first of those notable bowl games is number 17 Pittsburgh taking on the Rebels of Ole Miss, coming in ranked number 12 in the country. Ole Miss being one of the last teams left out of the college football playoff. So we will have a new national champion. But even though Ole Miss cannot be in this playoff and compete for that ultimate prize of a national championship, they can still finish this season out on a high note for sure. And here we find ourselves now down in the Bayou for that New Orleans Bowl, where Ole Miss is taking on Pitt for sure. And Ole Miss is playing some pretty good football. I mean, Ole Miss, they had some things go in their direction, or that normally would go in their direction, but didn't this year. So it's tough to miss the playoffs when you're 10-2, and one of your losses is to a very good Troy football team, might I add. But it seems like they are taking out their frustration pretty well against this Pittsburgh squad, which did achieve a little overachieving this year, making it to the Conference USA Championship game. Ole Miss is going to humble this Pittsburgh squad relatively quickly, though, I would say. They already take a 21-6 lead, but Pitt is going to shake back as Bo Beverly is going to find the end zone. It's a touchdown for the Panthers. A quick extra point gets Pitt back in it. However, in that second half, it was certainly all Ole Miss. Ole Miss able to run away with it in the second half, as the Rebels do put up nearly 50 points in a New Orleans Bowl victory over Pitt. Meanwhile, number 21, Iowa, who was a runner-up in the American Conference, lost the American Conference Championship to the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They will be taking on number 16 ranked Baylor. Baylor finishing up in a runner-up spot in the Lone Star Division over in the Big 12. They had the pleasure of having the number 1 team in America in Texas in their same division, and fortunately did not do enough to get an at-large bid. Two very good football teams though, so I'm excited to see how this particular game plays out in what is that alliteration of the Pop-Tarts Bowl, one of the best mascots in all of college football, I would truly argue. And we're getting a real-life Iowa-like game. We've been through a quarter of action here so far, and no one has scored yet, at least until the opening moments of the second quarter, when Ron Davis is able to punch it into the end zone. So Baylor will take a 7-0 lead. However, Iowa is trying to get back to work themselves, and Iowa has a quarterback in Drew Robinson. We've seen him multiple times this year in gameplay, and he's a quarterback that loves to run the ball. He has over 1,000 yards rushing, which is a rarity to really see in college football, at least from that quarterback position, so to speak. So definitely one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in college football. Really curious to see how Baylor handles that moving forward, but I'm sure it would also help as well if Baylor just didn't turn the football over. I mean, you can't have those kinds of mistakes, unfortunately. So now Drew Robinson company will take back over, trying to break a tackle, and now Drew Robinson, now on the sidelines, able to pick up a gain of 17. Is now second down coming up. Robinson looks to the right-hand side, throws a very well-placed ball over to Bill Bowen. That was some tight coverage, hitting that out route from the opposite hash. That is certainly an NFL throw. And Drew Robinson has that NFL talent, man. This is not just your typical college superstar. He has what it takes to play quarterback at the NFL level someday. And that kind of spark from Drew Robinson does lead the Hawkeyes to a 24-14 win in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Finally, wrapping up in terms of those notable bowl games that we have on the docket, we got number 13, Wisconsin. They will be taking on Virginia Tech. Now, these two teams right here are two of arguably the best at-large teams in the country that did not make it into the college football playoffs, so we should be in for a pretty good treat. It seems like Wisconsin was a little bit more prepared to play though, as even though Wisconsin's 8-4, they did have a tough schedule. Not as tough as this corner though, able to read the out pattern, and that's the risk when you throw those out pattern throws on the opposite hash, especially if you were not in time, and Mark Silva was definitely late delivering that football, and it sparks a Virginia Tech comeback. I mean, Wisconsin was ready to drop the hammer on this Virginia Tech team in the first half, and then next thing you know, they were just a few yards away from tying this thing up with Chris Pugh. Chris Pugh is able to continue to break that school record for most receiving yards in a single season, and so Virginia Tech uses that to tie this ball game up. We actually will have a ball game on our hands after all. 21-all is your score as Alvarez looks for the first lead of the day for the Hokies. Alvarez wants to keep it, but he does end up getting caught from behind, and it sets up a short 3rd and goal as Alvarez is going to drop back the pass, looks over to the right-hand side and finds Chris Pugh yet again for yet another touchdown for the Virginia Tech Hokies. And Chris Pugh not only setting that single season record for most yards in a year, he also sets it for most receptions in a single season as well. That's his 90th catch of the season. And for the first time today, Wisconsin finds itself down by 7, and they are not reacting very well. Just imploding right before our eyes as Matt Moore is able to find the end zone. Touchdown Hokies, as it's now going to be a 35-21 lead, as Silva wants to get the Wisconsin Badgers right back into the game. Wisconsin
able to find the end zone. There's a touchdown for the Badgers as they're trying to claw back in before the end of the half. Been a very exciting first half, though. I will say that. Had a lot of scoring here in this game thus far. Looking to see that continued here in the second half of action as Alvarez takes the handoff to Martin Davis from the left-hand side. And that will set up yet another goal line situation. Virginia Tech on the verge of a 50-burger here in this bowl game down in Orlando, Florida, and now they're just a 2-point conversion away. Virginia Tech now has a 49-28 lead, and Wisconsin now is going to need nothing short than a miracle if they just want to force overtime. Forget winning the game. Completely forget about winning the game for a quick second. We're talking about just tying the game. And you know what's not going to help you tie the game? Throwing interceptions in the end zone. I mean, Mark Silva, just trying to do a little bit too much on that particular drive. But Wisconsin does get it back for like in another minute or so. And so they're right back to where they started. They get a great run, though, from Michael Stukes. Michael Stukes on the verge of a 100-yard day. But I imagine they'll want to keep this in the air, though, because of the score. As Silva wants to get rid of that football, but Mark Silva instead is going to take the sack. So, 4th and goal now. Coming up for Mark Silva. Dropping back. Looks over the middle. He fumbles the ball. And Virginia Tech is going to recover. They recovered a fumble, and that turnover differential was the ultimate difference, as Virginia Tech is going to be your champions of the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, 49-28. Now, I'm obviously not going to talk about every single bowl game, but what I am going to do, though, is I am going to talk about maybe some more notable results among teams that were ranked in the top 25 when bowl season happened. First, let's talk about the Duke Blue Devil squad. They're going to reach 10 wins, which is the most for Duke in this series. They beat Ohio 31-24 in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. As for Penn State, they're going to be able to finish their season on the high note, beating Army 42-38 in the Arizona Bowl. Houston is actually going to also pull an upset off in the Texas Bowl presented by TexAx, beating Minnesota 21-10, so the Golden Gophers will likely fall out of the top 25 when the season is over. Troy, on the other hand, will not have that same problem as they beat Illinois 28-24 in order to win the Lennon Tree Bowl. Florida is able to take care of South Alabama 38-14 in the Music City Bowl. Florida being cemented in that top 25. Texas A&M also having its best season so far in the series, going to 9-4 after a 42-20 victory over Coastal Carolina. And rounding out notable bowl results, Georgia does beat the Miami Redhawks 28-19 in the ReliaQuest Bowl game. With that being said, though, Georgia, let's go ahead and get things started with the college football playoff. Georgia Tech, your champions of the SEC, they climb up to number 14 in the nation. They will be taking on the USC Trojans, who ended up winning the Pac-12 title game against the California Bears. So, here we go, getting things going against USC. Georgia Tech looking to strike first on the road, and they will, with Ahmad Morse touchdown, Yellow Jackets. And Ahmad Morse is known more for throwing that football and slinging that thing around, no diddy. But he knows how to put the ball into the end zone with his legs as well, but doesn't know how to take care of the ball, apparently, in the red zone, because Shabazz Harris, one of your guys' customs on the USC DB room, is able to get an interception in the red zone. So, instead of it being 14-0 in favor of Georgia Tech, all of a sudden, USC can tie this thing up before we get into the end of this first quarter. And they will, because that man was wide butt naked open. Jacob James will get the scoring started for that USC Trojan squad. But we'll quickly jump into the second half, as not much happens in that second quarter. But in the third quarter, though, USC really starts to find a groove, and we find out the hard way just how tough this USC team is, especially in a playoff scenario.
Looking over to the left-hand side, Brian Jennings finds the end zone for the USC Trojans. And then later on in the third quarter, roughly the exact same spot, Victor Spence on a different drive is going to punch it into the end zone there as well. And USC, after being in a dogfight with this Georgia Tech squad in the first half, all of a sudden it's turning very much into a one-sided affair. And here we are in the fourth quarter now. We've seen USC rattle off 21 unanswered points in the second half. They can easily make it 28 here if they execute properly, and they do. Victor Spence scores, and Victor Spence will beat Georgia Tech by 30 plus. We'll see what waits for USC on the opposite end. But for now, one thing that we do know is that the winner of this game will take on the Texas Longhorns. Texas is one of two teams that did get a bye into the quarterfinals. So we'll see who gets the right to play against Texas in that quarterfinal round. And this Nebraska team going up against the champions of Conference USA. George Gentry's offense is looking sharp to begin this playoff matchup here in Lincoln, Nebraska. Because on a 3rd and goal, Cornelius Reed looks to the right-hand side and finds Travis Wiggins in the end zone for the touchdown. And Nebraska quickly jumps all over the midshipmen. 21-2. Yes, Navy did end up getting a safety when we're simulating through the game, because I like to play in those key moments there, show you what you need to see, you know what I'm saying? But Nebraska puts up 28 in that first quarter, but the midshipmen are not abandoning ship, at least not yet anyways. Because Navy is putting together a red zone drive of their own. If they can punch it in here, it's a 12-point game. And Spencer Grant is going to be able to cut inside and make this a much more manageable 3rd down opportunity. They only need to pick up a few yards, which I know it's tight down here in the red zone, but that will certainly help the cause as Mike Thompson nearly scores for the midshipmen. But Spencer Grant also is able to really expand that school record for most passing yards in a career. He's thrown for over 8,500 yards, smashing the record at the time set by past Naval quarterbacks. But what he cannot do, though, is put this ball into the end zone, because Nebraska is going to force a fumble here down by the goal line. And now, with less than 3 minutes left, trying to put together one more drive before the half, and they certainly do that. Nebraska runs away with it and wins 66-23. If Nebraska can play like this, they got a pretty good shot against Texas as well. Meanwhile, we get into a battle of independent teams as Michigan and Miami are getting ready to go at it. Both these teams getting in as at-large squads. And what's also interesting is if we were still under this 12-team format, Miami and Michigan would have both missed the playoffs. Luckily, we did just expand to the 14-team playoff format. And so, because of that, we're now not only seeing Miami and seeing a Michigan in the college football playoff, we are seeing them go up against each other for the right to go to the quarterfinal. Ohio State will be waiting for them at the end of the tunnel, whoever seems to come out of it. But right now, though, it seems like Miami does have the early advantage, up 7-0 at the current moment, as Junior Blaylock drops back to pass and throws over the middle, has a man that breaks a couple of tackles, and Derek Hughes is able to find the end zone. Touchdown, Wolverines! We got ourselves a tied ball game on our hands, a tied ball game that extends out to the third quarter, but Miami is gonna read this screenplay like a page in a book, and Junior Blaylock and company are paying the ultimate price for it right now. Touchdown, Miami! And the Hurricanes are able to take the lead courtesy of a defensive touchdown. So now it does seem like the game is slipping away from the Michigan Wolverines. They need a spark here, and they need it now, because I'll tell you what, boys, their season is on the line here tonight. Late in the third quarter, Blaylock looks quickly over to right inside. They set up the screen, this time not read like a book. And Mario Sims takes advantage. A touchdown for the Wolverines helps them pull to within just a field goal. Blaylock, however, wants to give him the lead, and hopefully for good, as Brett Dawson scores. And sure enough, Michigan was able to complete the comeback against the Miami Hurricanes as they walk into Hard Rock Stadium and move on to the quarterfinals. So one last notable playoff game that we had here in the first round is number 18 Virginia, who surprised Virginia Tech in the ACC championship game. Well, they are taking on this San Diego State squad, who got in as the independent. Their only loss of the season did come against USC early in the season, but make no mistake, this Aztecs team is pretty damn good. And you see it on a run like that. It's a surprise that San Diego State is not up by more right now, because Tom O'Neal, that man is on fire. Over 250 yards here in the first half. And not to mention, he notches his 93rd career touchdown wearing that black and red for San Diego State. Jumping into the second half, as San Diego State is trying to close the door in their first playoff appearance in this series. Tom O'Neal, though, is staying on his feet, and he's going to be shoved out of bounds, but not before getting across that 5-yard line. So, first and goal for the Aztecs. Tom O'Neal's going to hand it off, and Ian Ashley is able to get leverage to the outside as well. So, another touchdown for the Aztecs. And they're also going to go for the 2-point conversion as well. O'Neal with all the time in the world, but Tim Stallings was forced to come back, and that took him out of the end zone. Would have been a 2-point conversion if Tom O'Neal threw a better pass. Still up 25-10 with a few minutes left here in this fourth quarter. I think San Diego State, I think them boys are going to be perfectly fine here. They're going to win their very first playoff game 39-10, and now it's just a matter of who they face in the quarterfinals. So with that said, we did have a couple of other first round games that were happening around various college campuses. LSU, the champions of the Sun Belt, took on the Mountain West champions in Arizona State. And Arizona State will drop their 7th game of the season as they were blown out ultimately by LSU 38-17. They'll be taking on USC in the quarterfinal. And then, of course, for the final first round matchup that we had, the champions of the MAC and the number 14 seeded Louisville Cardinals, they lose big to the Clemson Tigers, who also got in as an at-large, 38-6 being your final score. And so Clemson will take on San Diego State in the quarterfinals of the playoff. Speaking of those matchups in the quarterfinals, this is what it's looking like. Not only do we have that San Diego State and Clemson game, plus USC and LSU, but in this quarterfinal we'll have Ohio State taking on Michigan, the 3rd time that those two teams have met this year. Plus you got Texas taking on Nebraska in a neutral site Fiesta Bowl. So, with that being said, let's jump into these quarterfinal games. Let's see who makes it into the Final Four. So now let's go ahead and get that quarterfinals officially underway. We got that 3rd time, Chapter 3 of this epic rivalry here in year number 5 of the NCSL. We got number 9 Michigan, number 1 Ohio State. They are both meeting once again for the right to go to the semifinals of the college football playoff. We're going to see right now who gets that first spot as Ohio State down 7-3, trying to throw to the outside, but Brooks Hicks is intercepted, and that interception allows Michigan to hold on to that lead. But it won't be long until Ohio State gets the ball yet again, and Brooks Hicks is going to be able to punch it in. Ohio State has the lead after 1 quarter. Jumping into the second quarter now, as Blaylock is going to hand the ball off to his tailback, Drew Welsh. Drew Welsh out there getting some tough yards It has not been easy for him to get into open space, averaging less than 3 yards a carry. Thankfully, Junior Blaylock is carrying this offense to that lead. And it just goes to show how evenly matched these two teams have been all season long. Both teams just been trading punches with each other this whole dang time. 3rd and 1 coming up. Blaylock looking over the middle. Finds Derek Hughes into the end zone. Touchdown, Wolverines! And Derek Hughes extends a school record for most receiving yards in a season. He might be the first Michigan receiver ever to hit 1,500 yards receiving, especially after he pulls all that kind of stuff too. He's got a great quarterback throwing him the ball as Junior Blaylock. A lot of people did not know if he could live up to what FM4 did back when he was a Michigan Wolverine. Well, I'm sure that he's silencing some doubters now. He has some individual record for most passing touchdowns in a season. But I'll tell you this, though. This game is far from over. Michigan's got to hit this field goal in order to send it to overtime. It is hit. And you can see what Junior Blaylock did on that final drive, putting them in good field position. However, in the first overtime, Michigan did have to settle for yet another field goal. So if Ohio State scores on this touchdown on this drive, then we'll see the Buckeyes in the semifinals. And they're only 5 yards away from doing that as now. Hicks looks over to the right-hand side, finding the tight end. Gavin Richardson fights his way through. Touchdown, Ohio State. And the Buckeyes will eliminate their hated rivals, the team up north, as Ohio State will move on to the semifinals of the college football playoff. The only decision left now: who will this Ohio State team face up in the semifinals? We're about to find that now as well, as San Diego State is getting ready to gear things up against Clemson Tigers. Clemson Tigers coming in as one of the bannermen of the ACC. San Diego State also representing as the highest ranked team in this playoff for the Pac-12 as well. So some conference pride on the line in addition to a second spot in the college football playoff as well. And San Diego State gets itself off on a fast start. No Diddy at all, as Ian Ashley is able to pick up a few yards. And you can see the explosiveness of Ian Ashley. That's why he's already has 100 yards on the ground, and we haven't even reached halftime yet. Clemson has since made some adjustments, but I mean, even with those adjustments, Ian Ashley is averaging almost 10 yards a carry. But it's all about the Tom O'Neal show as he finds his receiver in the end zone. Touchdown, Clemson. And Clemson finds itself down 21-0 here in this college football playoff. This is certainly no Louisville. This is not going to be a pushover in this Aztec squad as well. So Clemson's got to really pull it together here in the second half, and that will certainly help. Charles Ernst finding the end zone with 6:30 left to play in the third quarter. And then later on in that same quarter, Ernst trying to lead another red zone possession. This would lead Clemson down by just one possession if they can punch this one into the end zone as well, as Ernst is going to trust his legs into the end zone. Touchdown, Tigers. Clemson now just pulls within just one possession, as now they even have a chance to tie the game, but a one-on-one ball is badly lost. And San Diego State from there is going to handle its business. A lower scoring Rose Bowl, but San Diego State wins it, and they will see Ohio State in the semis. So now we got to settle what's going on the other side of the college football playoff bracket, as now Nebraska looks to go to work against Texas and expect nothing short of fireworks. Two of the top offenses in America getting ready to duel it out, and you could see how efficient these offenses are. Cornelius Reed getting things started with another touchdown to Travis Wiggins, his 15th of the season. That does set a new record here at Nebraska. And they're not even close to being done here in the first quarter. Already up 7-0. Nebraska wants to continue to build some distance between them and Texas because they know they can score in a heartbeat. As Pierre Nelson's able to run forward for a gain of 8 on the play. He's able to set up a goal line opportunity. As now, first and goal coming up, Cornelius Reed looking across the middle and finds Shane Jackson in the end zone. Touchdown, Cornhuskers! And the Cornhuskers are absolutely rolling through this quarterfinal matchup right now. And it's not going to stop anytime soon, as Cornelius Reed needed a perfect throw. And he's got it. His 44th passing touchdown of the season. It sets yet another school record here at the University of Nebraska. One that has them with a huge lead. But that huge lead will not last long as Texas claws its way back into the game. They get 14 unanswered before we go into the halftime locker room. So now it's back to pretty much being even Steven. Start of the second half, though. This is the spark that Texas might be looking for. Down the sideline, no one left to chase him down, and now it's a foot race. One that 87 does not lose very often. Drew Martin takes it to the crib, 95 yards. And Texas takes the lead for the very first time today in the quarterfinals. And they'll go for 2 as well, with Jason Adams just barely missing. So the 2-point conversion is no good. And now it's a 5-point game. Meanwhile, later on in the third quarter, after Nebraska cannot respond, the Texas Longhorns drive down the length of the field, looking to continue the onslaught that they are putting on this Nebraska squad. And this is why that hot start for Nebraska was so important, because we knew this was something that could happen. Texas can score in a heartbeat. They've averaged nearly 50 points a game this entire season. So now the number 2 offense in America desperately needs to come out, and they need to get some points fast. 4th and short as they try to go with the halfback drive. Pierre Nelson breaks the tackle and finds his way into the end zone. Touchdown, Cornhuskers! And the Cornhuskers now find themselves only down by 5. A chance to take the lead with 5 minutes left in the game after they get a rare stop here in this Fiesta Bowl action. As now, 2nd and goal coming up. Cornelius trying to throw it down to the back of the end zone, and they get it. Touchdown, Pierre Nelson. And that gives Nebraska the lead with 4:41 left to play. They want the 2-point conversion, though, to try to make this a field goal difference. That, however, does not work. So now, it's all in the hands of this defense. And one more first down. Actually, that throw right there now gets Texas firmly into field goal range. Very is curious to see how the Nebraska coaching staff plays this out. They have all of their timeouts. Do they use them, however, to try to preserve as much time as possible? Because it's more than likely Texas is either going to field goal or a touchdown. Don't know what it's going to be. And it turns out it's going to be a touchdown for the Texas Longhorns. 109 left. But there is 3 timeouts left that they can utilize to their advantage. They'll also go for the 2-point conversion here as Jason Adams will drop back, looks over the middle, and finds Donnie Clark for the 2-point conversion, which does mean that Nebraska must work the whole length of the field, 80 yards, in less than 70 seconds. We wish them nothing but the best of luck, one that could decide their season. 1st and 10 coming up. Cornelius Reed drops back. He's got time. He fires downfield. He's got a guy. Shane Jackson for a 43-yard reception. And it comes down to this last play. Can they get the last few yards that they need? Reed, end zone, but it's intercepted. It's picked off at the final moment. And Texas will seal a trip to the semifinals of the college football playoff after all, which does mean that it comes down to this. Who's going to get that final spot in the semifinals, USC which beat that Texas team in the quarterfinals last year, or LSU, looking to make one of its deepest runs in the NCSL series since we got it started 4 game seasons ago. That being said, USC and LSU getting ready to work at it again midway through the first quarter. There is still no score on the clock yet, but LSU looks to change that. With a broken tackle, somehow this quarterback's still on his feet, and Derek Brown finds the end zone. That is his 8th rushing touchdown of the season, and it comes at a great time, putting some distance between them and USC. Brown looking to try to continue it, but he puts the ball on the ground the last second. Recovered by the Trojans, and the defense does end up coming out big. However, this offense needs to pull its weight as well, as it nearly took them an entire half of football just for USC to get up on this scorecard. But hey, it's only a 7-point game. They can still come back and tie this thing up, as Victor Spence now getting ready to run. It's no huddle offense. 1 timeout left to work through, less than 90 seconds left. Can Victor Spence drive the other 40 yards necessary to tie this game? Spence looks over in the middle. He's got a receiver, and it's Myron Jones for the first down, able to pick up a gain of 15 on the play. 1st and 10 coming up after that nice conversion, as Victor Spence goes with the play action, doesn't like what he sees downfield, breaks the tackle, breaks through another one, and nearly forces his way into the end zone. They will mark him shy at the 1-yard line, where the tailback Jacob James is going to be able to pull off the rest of the work though, and we'll have a tied game at half. Now, jumping into the second half of action, though, as Victor Spence wants to give his USC Trojan squad the lead for the very first time today. Look at this effort. It takes nearly the entire LSU defense just to get him out of bounds. He was not quitting on that play, and frankly, that tackling was absolutely egregious, and it reared its ugly head here as well. USC able to score there as well, as the Trojans look like they're ready to just about pull away. But with 6 minutes left, Aaron Gunn will score for the Tigers, their first score in a country mile minute. But they got to get a stop. LSU, can they get the stop? This is their season on the line. A trip to the semifinals of the college football playoff at stake. And right now, it seems like this defense is running out of gas. Allowed to run some clock off, and Tony Mitchell is going to seal the deal. USC is going to beat LSU 38-24 in the All-State Sugar Bowl matchup. So with that being said, we are now closing in on your Final Four, and this is just such a banner moment for the Pac-12. 2 of the 4 teams represented in the semifinals are Pac-12 teams, but can the Pac-12 continue to perform here in this college football playoff, with now a trip to the national championship game officially on the line? So with that being said, let's go ahead and get that semifinals of the college football playoff officially underway. USC getting at it against the Texas Longhorns, and these 2 teams did meet up in the college football playoff last year. They met in the quarterfinals, and it was a game in which USC was able to win. So we'll see if Texas will be able to get its revenge. Texas, of course, playing 1 less game to get to this point, as they were one of 2 teams in the college football playoff to get a bye. As Victor Spence starts us off with a rushing touchdown on the ground, giving USC an early lead. But Derek Hawthorne is going to run through a couple of defenders, and Texas will answer that bell as well. So we got a competitive game and possibly a classic on our hands, as Jacob James will help USC regain the lead. Pressure now being placed on Texas, as Texas is going to throw it out quickly to Austin Tyler. Austin Tyler able to pick up a few yards, but Jason Adams with this particular throw is going to set the new school record for most passing yards in a season. we are now closing in on just one game away from having 4,000 passing yards. He's right there on the cusp. 3rd and 4 coming up. Adams looking to throw over the middle, and Donnie Clark is just going to barely get that first down, but boy, was it absolutely close. And so we'll have a goal line situation now, where a couple of plays later, Omar Jackson will score, and Jason Adams will set yet another school record. That is a 47th passing touchdown of the season, which does happen to be the most in Texas football history. So a tie ball game going into the later portions of the second quarter. All knotted up at 14 as Victor Spence takes the read option. He's going to make a couple guys miss and finds his way into the end zone. His second rushing scamper of the day. And it ended up being that back and forth type of affair the whole time. But USC will be the ones pulling it out, winning 30-22. And now that $1 million question is, who's going to meet USC in that national championship game? Will it be San Diego State, who also happens to be from the Pac-12 as well? Or are we going to see this #1 defense from Ohio State, who is able to get that goal line stand, courtesy of a Henry Williams interception? It eventually leads to a touchdown the other way. But it's been a type of game where both teams are they're kind of feeling each other out. You know, a lot of punches being pulled. No one's showing all the cards in the deck yet. But yet, here we are with less than a minute and a half here in the first half. As now, Ohio State's trying to put together a drive to carry momentum into the locker room. As that's a broken tackle down the sideline. And that is going to be forced out of bounds. So now, looking at a 1st and 10 from the 20. Couple of plays later, Hicks looks over the middle again. He's going to find Chad London nearly for yet another first down. Doesn't quite get there, but Brooks Hicks and company is going to get his guys to the line quickly. They only have one timeout to work with. Going to throw it over to the outside, and Anton Samuel almost finds the end zone, but he will be denied though, as they'll try to run it in for the touchdown, and they will with Jonathan Sherman. The Sherman tank is going to extend a rushing touchdown career record set all the way back in the 1970s. So that's how Ohio State gets the lead, but on the ensuing kickoff, we got a decent little return rate here. No one is going to touch this guy down the sideline. Okay, he gets touched there, but he can't be brought down. And no one's stopping Scott Robinson from finding the end zone. Touchdown, Aztecs. And it's all tied up again. 14-all. So 14-all is now officially your scores. We get into the second half of action. Ohio State deferred to the second half, and they'll start things off right with a touchdown on the ground yet again. Different ball carrier this time, though. And that will be your score for the remainder of that quarter, as no one else manages to score in that third quarter. So now we move forward with about 6 minutes left in the game. San Diego State has a chance to tie, and they will. Ian Ashley finds the end zone. Touchdown, San Diego State. And the Aztecs are right back in it. And then a few minutes later, they have a chance to take the lead. And they will. Tim Stallings finds the end zone. Touchdown, Aztecs. And that's the 40th touchdown pass for Tom O'Neal. Most by any Aztecs player since all the way back in 1969. And it sets up this field goal to send San Diego State to the national championship game. Can they sink it through? Yes, they do! San Diego State is going to shock the college football world. And down goes #1, Ohio State. So we started this playoff with 14 teams. And even though 2 teams had a bye, neither team made it to the national championship game this year. Instead, we got 2 teams from the Pac-12 who faced off in the regular season. They will now go face to face against each other for the right to hoist that season number 5 national championship. Can San Diego State get its revenge? Or will USC be able to take down their conference opponent twice in one season and claim their second national title in the NCSL? Let's go onto the field and find out now. So USC is the favorite, even though San Diego State is the higher seed. But San Diego State has been doubted multiple times in this tournament, and yet they found a way to make it to this national championship. So you never know what could happen, especially in a rematch. Hard to beat a good team twice, as Tom O'Neal is going to get the Aztecs within a few yards of the goal line. They have a real chance to put up the first points of this national championship, and they will, with Ian Ashley finding the end zone. Touchdown, Aztecs! But the Aztecs will be on the back end of a 13-0 run. However, Tom O'Neal will get them back into the red zone here midway into the second quarter, and they have yet another opportunity to go ahead and find the end zone as O'Neal drops back. He's got some time and fires it to Chad Simmons in the end zone. Another touchdown for San Diego State. So the Aztecs will carry a 1-point lead, but it will be Jacob James that'll close out the scoring in the first half, taking a 20-14 lead into the halftime. And here's the thing, USC started with the ball to begin this second half of action, and now we try to see if San Diego State can make a big play down here on the goal line. 20-14 your score, as Victor Spence is going to try to run it into the end zone, bringing some tackles, balls on the ground, and Ryan Jennings recovers and still puts it in the end zone anyways. Sometimes it's just better to be good, or to better be lucky than it is to be good, and that is certainly a case of that. Bad break for the Aztecs as they face their biggest deficit of this national championship game so far, as O'Neal will drop back, fire over the middle. He's gonna find his receiver. Another touchdown for Tom O'Neal, and the Aztecs will pull to within just 6 points. Meanwhile, midway through the fourth quarter here, Tom O'Neal actually has a chance to give the Aztecs the lead, and they got it. The Aztecs will take the lead, and if they can get a stop on USC one more time, then it could be the Aztecs holding that national championship crown at the end of this ball game. But USC is putting together a drive of their own. Victor Spence had a nice little run there, and then he's gonna polish it off with a 4-yard touchdown. USC will officially have the lead. They will even go for that 2-point conversion as well, which is no good. So it did open up the door for the Aztecs. However, San Diego State could not do anything on that final drive. And USC is going to be your national champions after all. A close one. Thought we were going to see that Cinderella story get completed by San Diego State, but they will fall just short, unfortunately. And that does mean that USC will hold its second national championship here in the NCSL Dynasty Series in the last 5 seasons. Could it be that we are seeing a possible dynasty form in USC? I'm sure they'll worry about now. They'll celebrate tonight, though. So it was certainly a fun season to watch, and now we just take a quick look to see who were our award winners this year, as well as who was our leaders in the NCSL. So it starts with Jason Blaylock. He was the quarterback for the Michigan Wolverines. He actually does finish with 4,800 yards passing this year, which is good as the highest passing yards person in the entire NCSL. Leading the running backs was the Sherman Tank out of Ohio State. He had 1,922 yards. Pierre Nelson out in Nebraska was just 10 yards behind him. For the receivers, Mr. Carter out of Western Kentucky led the way with over 1,800 yards receiving, and he does that even though Western Kentucky did not get to go to a bowl game this year. For leading tacklers, Johnson out of Michigan had the most solo tackles with 69, which is very nice. Sack leaders leads to Mr. Malone out of North Texas. He is the only man with more than 11 sacks. There were a couple of other guys, though, that had double-digit sacks this year. And for interceptions, Peter Cole out of Kentucky had nearly double-digit interceptions in one season. He had 9 interceptions in the 12 games that Kentucky played this year. And of course, we had a tie for first place for the longest field goal this season. Price of Iowa State and Kramer out of the University of Pitt both hit 56-yard field goals, which ties for the longest in the NCSL. Now, looking at your award winners, got to start with the granddaddy of them all in the Heisman Trophy. Jason Adams did end up winning the Heisman Trophy this year out of the University of Texas. Not only does he end up winning the Heisman Trophy, but he also wins the Davey O'Brien Award, which goes to the best quarterback in college football. Should be absolutely no surprises there, given his performance this season. However, the Maxwell Award goes to a different person, though. It's going to go to Greg Jenkins for that Maxwell Award. He is a senior quarterback out of Troy who had over 52 touchdowns this year. He also wins the Walter Camp Award as well. As for the Bernerick, it goes to outside linebacker Chase Wise out of the University of Nebraska. The senior not only wins the Bangeret Award, but also is going to win the Butkus Award for the Nebraska Cornhuskers as well. As for the Nagurski Award, which goes to one of the best defenders in the country, this year it's going to go to Nick Burnett, who is a junior out of the Navy Academy, and this is not even the only award that he wins. Nick Burnett is also going to be your Lombardi Award winner, which goes to the best defensive lineman in the country. Up next is the Walker Award, and that will go to Ohio State senior running back Jonathan Sherman out of Circleville, Ohio. He ends with 1,900 yards on the year. Shout out to Mason Williams, who is one of your guys' customs, though. The junior running back from Georgia finishes in 5th place for the Walker Award. As for the Biletnikoff, the leading receiver in the country in Orlando Carter does get rewarded with the Biletnikoff Award out of Western Kentucky. In 7th place, though, is one of your guys' customs as well in Tyrell Smoochie Wallace, who ends the year with over 1,100 yards in his junior campaign for the Miami Hurricanes. As for that Mackey Award, it goes to senior tight end Joe McCoy out of Troy. He's from Rutland, Vermont. The Outland Trophy goes to Matt Coleman, the senior out of Ohio State. The Remington will also go to Matt Coleman as well, so multiple awards for the senior center. As for the Jim Forpay Award, that is going to go to Jeremy Coleman, the junior out of St. Martinsville, Louisiana. The Groza Award goes to Keenan Lewis, a senior kicker out of Anniston, Alabama, who's played for the Georgia Bulldogs. Kyle Guy Award goes to Ben Rose, the senior out of Virginia Tech, hailing from North Druid Hills, Georgia. And the Jet Award, which is the best return man in college football, goes to Bull Beverly, the senior red shirt for the Pittsburgh Panthers, hailing from Belgrade, Florida. Do want to take the time to also give a shout out to the junior running back Chase Gentry out of Ole Miss as well, being a finalist for the Jet, as he is one of your guys' customs as well. And then real quick, we'll take a quick look at your first team All-American list over the course of this season. And don't have a lot of surprises here, obviously. Do have a FCS transfer in Chaz Riley, who ends up being a first team All-American. He's from Oklahoma. And then here is the rest of that first team All-American list for both the offense and the defense as well. And then here is your second team All-American list going in for season number 5 and what transpired onto the field. And it seems like we do have a pretty solid diversity of players over the course of this season, which you absolutely do love to see that, being that we are, this deep into the series. So now we get to the coaching carousel here in season number 5, and we start with the University of Alabama, who fired Glenn Schulman after a 4-8 campaign. They do end up hiring Jamin Folk, who was the defensive coordinator of that national championship team at USC. As for Syracuse, they do end up hiring Jordan Leslie, who was a head coach at Troy's 11-3 campaign. That Troy team nearly making the college football playoff. They were runner-ups in the Sun Belt. Meanwhile, Auburn ends up deciding to hire Clay Patterson, who's coming off of a 9-4 season. He'll now be the new head coach of the Auburn Tigers. As for the Miami Redhawks, they will hire Kendall Smith, who was the defensive coordinator at the University of Texas, as Miami seeks to get back to their winning ways. Now, Troy did end up losing their head coach to Syracuse, so they end up deciding to replace that by going after the defensive coordinator at LSU and Mike Paris, so he will remain within that Sun Belt Conference. As for North Texas, they do end up hiring Mike Elko, who was the defensive coordinator at Clemson. North Texas Mean Green, they are replacing their head coach after Mike Locksley has retired. Now, with that being said, George Gentry did end up feeling that he did everything that he could, almost everything that he could have done at Nebraska, but he is ready to take on bigger and better things. So, that being said, George Gentry, and I know he's been thinking about that head coaching opportunity for a long time, he is going to take things over at Boston College. Boston College, a decent program, but they've fallen on hard times, going to that 1-11 this past season. So, with that being said, George Gentry will be your new head coach at Boston College. Now, as for the Wyoming Cowboys, they did end up losing their head coach to Auburn. So, in order to replace that, they go to defensive coordinator Brian Franklin of the Iowa Hawkeyes in order to provide him with a head coaching opportunity. As for Marshall, they will hire the former head coach of Alabama, Glenn Schulman, who was just fired at Alabama after a 4-8 season. North Carolina State will also hire the defensive coordinator from Virginia Tech in Richard Mullins, his defense coming off of a 12-2 campaign. Virginia Tech nearly making it to the college football playoff. They were the last team out. Kansas is getting a new head coach once again, and this time it's going to be Spencer Danielson, the defensive coordinator from Pitt, given a chance to try to turn things around. Which, speaking of the former Kansas head coach, he's actually going to remain in the American Conference because Central Michigan is going to hire him as their new head coach. As for Mid-Tennessee State, the Blue Raiders are looking to turn things around from that 2-10 season, so they will hire Tyson Summers from Troy to become their new head coach. He was a defensive coordinator on that team. As for Purdue, they will hire their newest head coach from Miami. The former Redhawks coach was fired after a 6-7 season, but is going to go to Purdue, which is ironically also in the same conference. Now, later on, James Madison was in need of a new head coach with Clayton Light being fired, so they end up hiring somebody from Coach McNair's staff. The offensive coordinator for Duke and Josh Gaddis, he is going to become the new head coach of the James Madison football team. Now, Western Michigan did also fire their coach after a 3-9 season. He, of course, went on to become defensive coordinator of Pitt. Their new head coach is going to be Alex Golish, who was also fired from Mid-Tennessee State after a 2-10 campaign. So J.D. Weeks did not survive a full year as the head coach of Old Dominion because his team was really bad, but he couldn't maximize the talent necessarily either. He went 1-11 for a reason. Now it's going to be Charles Huff's turn to try to turn around Old Dominion. He's the offensive coordinator of Bowling Green. Bowling Green is coming off of a pretty good season. They went 9-4. As for Utah State, the Aggies are looking for a new head coach after going 2-10 under Travis Trinket. They are going to call upon Joel Rodriguez, who was the former head coach of Purdue, but was fired after that 4-8 campaign within the Big Ten. Now, with that being said, JD Weeks would eventually get back on his feet after being fired as the head coach of the Old Dominion Monarchs. He is offered the opportunity to be an offensive coordinator at South Alabama. South Alabama coming off of a decent season, going 6-7, but they did lose their bowl game. So with that said, JD Weeks will now become the offensive coordinator of the Southern Alabama Jaguars. One more coaching change that I do want to mention is that Alex Sanders was also a custom coach that was on the same staff as JD Weeks. He was fired as well alongside him, and Alex Sanders did not find a new job, so he is taking at least a year off from coaching. His job was replaced by Casey Woods, who is part of the coaching staff that has been assembled by Charles Huff. And then, of course, we have recruiting. Recruiting being one of the most important ways and one of the more fundamental ways of trying to build your college football team from the ground up, even with the transfer portal being a little bit more of a thing nowadays. Now, there was some surprises in here, like Fresno State and Southern Miss, for example, being a top 25 recruiter, even though they finished below 500, and they're more known for they're not as big brands, is what I'm trying to say. Virginia signing a top 25 class, that was pretty cool to see, but there was a few other teams that actually did make the college football playoff, but did not sign a top 25 class. One of them was the Naval Academy. The Naval Academy finished 12-2, and they made it to the first round of the college football playoff, and in spite of having 2 consecutive playoff appearances, Navy was not able to fully capitalize off of that. Speaking of not being able to fully capitalize, what is going on down in Miami? Miami is one of the better programs on the field, and yet they have struggled to recruit. They did not sign a top 25 class last season. They failed to sign a top 40 class this year. Could be some alarm bells going on down in South Florida. As for the Clemson Tigers, they signed the number 48 class in America, and given that Charles Ernst is also graduating from his team, that's their starting quarterback, could be a team that is prone to regress in year number 6, because they may have been a top 5 team on the field, but they certainly did not look like it at all when it comes to hitting those recruiting trails. And then maybe the biggest surprise of them all was Louisville being all the way down here at number 93, the 93rd ranked recruiting class, even though they made the playoff as undefeated MAC champions. They got bounced in that first round, but you would think they would do a little bit better than 93rd. Maybe that might suggest that Louisville, although they overachieved this year, they might have actually been a one-year wonder. So that is going to wrap things up here in today's episode of the NCSL. I know it was a longer episode than usual, but I really enjoyed this, and I'm really curious to hear what you guys think of this new formatting. I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you also enjoyed this full season of NCSL football, make sure you go ahead and do a couple of things for me. Hit that like button, and then also hit that subscribe button as well if you do have to be brand new to the channel. Next time out, we will have season 6 of the NCSL Dynasty here on College Football Revamp. But with that being said, this is John J Gaming on the mic signing off. But hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.